Chapter 1468. You can refine high-grade confinement talismans? After hearing Fu Feng's words, not only was Fu Feng surprised, even Fu Zhu, Fu Mu, and Fu Zhu's eyes were filled with astonishment. Although there were many talisman masters in the Fu clan's Jinhua Mountain, there were very few who could refine high-grade yellow talismans, let alone high-grade confinement talismans. Xiaohua quickly waved his hand. Elder Fu Feng, you've misunderstood me. I don't know how to write talismans in the talisman crafting method, so I can't refine confinement talismans. Oh, so it's like that. Fu Feng smiled and said, You don't need to be modest. Compared to the entire refining process of confinement talismans, the method of writing talismans is nothing. Different sects have different methods of writing talismans. Since there are differences, it's not the most important thing. When you have the opportunity to learn the method of writing talismans in the future, refining confinement talismans will be easy. I don't dare. I hope Elder Fu Feng can teach me. Xiaohua bowed and said, Good, Xiaohua. Since you've become a talisman master in my Fu clan, you must follow my Fu clan's rules. Now that you've entered my skyward pavilion, you must show off your skills and not lose face for Elder Lu Yun. Fu Feng smiled. Right, Elder Fu, this is Elder Lu's token. Xiaohua just handed it over. Fu Zhao quickly handed over the token. Fu Feng nodded and accepted it. Xiaohua took out a talisman brush, talisman paper, and talisman ink from his storage pouch. Fu Feng and the others frowned when they saw what Xiaohua was using. Xiaohua, you're using these to refine confinement talismans? Fu Zhao couldn't help but ask. Yes. Xiaohua nodded. But confinement talismans are high-grade yellow talismans. If you use high-grade talisman brush, high-grade talisman paper, and high-grade talisman ink, will it be better? Fu Feng couldn't help but ask. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Elder Fu Feng, I'll let you know. Those high-grade items are all exchanged with high-grade spirit stones. Where would I get so many high-grade spirit stones when I'm just a 4th stage Qi refinement cultivator? That's true. Fu Zhao looked at Xiaohua sympathetically. Hold on. As Fu Feng spoke, he slapped his hand and withdrew high-grade talisman paper, talisman ink, and talisman brushes from his storage pouch before passing them over with a smile. Use these to refine the talisman. Is it useful? Xiaohua muttered in his heart, but he still gratefully accepted the item. Sure enough, when Xiaohua poured his transcendence energy into that high-grade talisman paper, he felt that the control of transcendence energy was much stronger than that of a low-grade talisman brush. It was almost comparable to his bare finger. On the other hand, the high-grade talisman ink was even more tightly wrapped around the magic power. Just a little bit of talisman ink was enough to wrap around a lot of magic power, and it was far from what low-grade talisman ink could compare to. This humble one will embarrass himself. As Xiaohua spoke, he pretended to hold his breath and began to refine the imprisonment talisman on the talisman paper. Xiaohua's technique was very proficient, and the runes he wrote were also very smooth. He also grasped the various timings very well. Every time the rune ink was about to be unable to contain the magic power, he would write the runes onto the talisman paper. The high-grade talisman paper was very easy to use, and after several flashes of brilliance, it did not turn into ashes. However, Xiaohua did not have the method to write the runes. In the end, when there was still a long way to go before he could successfully refine the imprisonment talisman, the talisman paper still ignited with a pu sound. This humble one. Xiaohua stood guard and raised his head. However, what welcomed him were the fiery gazes of the 5 people. The 5 people present were all talisman masters, and they had all been immersed in the art of talisman crafting for many years. With their insight, how could they not see through it? Xiaohua only lacked the method to write the runes. As long as he understood the method to write the runes, he would be able to refine a high-grade imprisonment talisman at any time. Sigh, what Elder Lu Yun said was true. Fu Yingmin, this fellow, has made a great contribution to our Fu clan this time. Fu Feng sighed. That was because the Fu clan had to spend a lot of effort to cultivate a talisman master who could refine high-grade imprisonment talismans. However, a talisman master who could refine imprisonment talismans right after entering the Fu clan. In the future, he would definitely be a guest elder. How could Fu Feng not sigh? However, what Xiaohua has done is nothing. Fu Zhao retracted her astonishment and looked at Song Ying with a smile. He Fu is able to refine all 5 elemental yellow talismans to the middle grade. This is even rarer in our Fu clan. Fu Feng looked at Song Ying and nodded. That's right. The Fireball Talisman, Weak Water Talisman, Earth Mass Talisman, Wood Life Talisman, and Sharp Metal Talisman are all low-grade 5 elemental yellow talismans that reinforce and restrain each other. They are closely related to the talisman master's physique. It's already not easy for an ordinary talisman master to refine 2 types of talismans. However, He Fu was able to refine all 5 types of talismans to the middle grade. Fellow Taoist He? Aren't you going to show us? Fu Zhu said with a smile. Since Senior Sister Fu has spoken, how could I dare to disobey? He glanced at the 3 women and cupped his hands in a very confident manner. He picked up the talisman brush that Xiaohua used just now, activated his magic power, and dipped it in talisman ink. His wrist was like a chick pecking rice, shaking it in different ways. His other hand took out 5 identical high-grade talisman papers from his storage bag, lined them up in a circle, and placed them in front of him. What? This? Don't tell me. He wants to refine the 5 elemental yellow talismans at the same time? Once they saw Song Ying's posture, not only Xiaohua, but the 4 people from the Fu clan also looked at each other with incomparable shock on their faces. This shock was definitely 100 times more shocking than when they saw Xiaohua refining the confinement talisman. Song Ying was very calm and the talisman brush in his hand didn't stop at all. First, he smoothly wrote the sharp metal talisman onto the talisman paper. However, when he put down the brush, he very strangely slipped the brush and a trace of talisman ink appeared in the talisman, hanging from the sharp metal talisman to the blank yellow talisman beside it. At this moment, the incomplete sharp metal talisman was faintly flickering, as if it was about to spontaneously combust. However, the extra trace of talisman ink had a trace of magic power hanging over the sharp metal talisman, preventing it from burning. Immediately after, Song Ying started to refine the Wood Life talisman from the talisman ink on the blank yellow talisman paper. At the same time, he also left the last trace of talisman ink on the blank yellow talisman paper, and the Wood Life talisman also began to faintly flicker. Next, the talisman ink was connected to the Weak Water talisman, and the Weak Water talisman ink was connected to the Fireball talisman. Until the last Earth Mask talisman was drawn, Song Ying skillfully flicked his brush and an extra trace of talisman ink appeared. From the Earth Mask talisman, he hung the first sharp metal talisman that he drew. The moment the trace of talisman ink that contained earth chi hung onto the sharp metal talisman, a crisp, kacha sound came from the sharp metal talisman. A middle-grade sharp metal talisman was refined. Following the birth of the sharp metal talisman, a trace of gold chi was transmitted through the talisman ink into the Wood Life talisman. The talisman ink that hung on the sharp metal talisman gradually dimmed. With a kacha sound, the Wood Life talisman was also formed. At the same time, a trace of wood chi was transmitted into the Weak Water talisman. When the Weak Water talisman was formed, a trace of water chi was transmitted into the Fireball talisman. When the Fireball talisman was successfully refined, a trace of fire chi was transmitted into the Earth Mask talisman. At this moment, the trace of Earth Mask talisman that was thrown onto the sharp metal talisman completely disappeared. With a crisp kacha sound, the last Earth Mask talisman was successfully refined. 5 5-element talismans were refined very skillfully by Song Ying. The entire Skyward Pavilion was silent. Song Ying stood there very satisfied, smiling as he looked at the shocked 5 people. Even Xiaohua, he had never thought that the 5-element talisman could be refined in such a way. Great! After a long while, Fu Feng was the first to come to his senses. He clapped his hands and said, using the 5 elements to suppress each other and prevent the incomplete 5-element talisman from being destroyed. Then using the 5 elements to generate the 5-element talismans one by one in order. Such a miraculous talisman refining method, if one was not a genius, how could one think of it? God bless my Fu family! When he looked at Fu Zhu and Fu Puppet again, the previous good impression in his eyes had turned into an indescribable emotion in an instant. There was admiration, envy, and a trace of longing. Amazing! This was Xiaohua's only thought at this time. In his mind, a yellow talisman was a yellow talisman, and he could just refine it one by one. He had never dreamed that someone would make use of the principle of mutual restraint and generation of the 5 elements to refine these 5 completely different yellow talismans in one go, as if pushing a boat with the current. At this time, suddenly, a divine sense swept in from outside the skyward pavilion. It circled around everyone's bodies and locked onto Xiaohua and Song Ying. This divine sense was very unfamiliar. Xiaohua's eyes moved slightly, but Fu Feng's face was filled with joy. He stood up and said, "Congratulations, Family Head, this one has just obtained 2 geniuses and Family Head has heard the news and come here. This is really fate!" "Eh? Which family's Jianxiu is this? To be able to make my Fu family Skyward Pavilion's elder Fu Feng praise him so much?" A gentle voice came from outside the Skyward Pavilion. "Family Head!" Fu Zhu, Fu Puppet, and Fu Puppet's faces were filled with joy. They quickly walked out of the Skyward Pavilion to welcome the guest. Xiaohua and Song Ying looked at each other and saw a kind of surprise in each other's eyes. Song Ying's eyes were filled with a trace of panic and sternness. Xiaohua naturally knew what Song Ying was thinking, but this had nothing to do with him. He only wanted to find a stable place to cultivate in the Fu family, and see if he could get his hands on any Yunqing talismans. If he didn't have any, then it was fine. After a year, if he was happy here, he would go to the Imperial Thunder Sect and dissolve the medicinal efficacy of the clear flower pill in his meridians. He would then give the strange bead to the Imperial Thunder Sect and return here to cultivate. If he was unhappy, he would leave the Fu family. After all, he was just a talisman master, not selling his life to the Fu family. Fu Feng stood up to welcome the guest. Xiaohua and Song Ying followed behind him. When the 3 of them reached the center of the main hall, an old man in his 40s walked in with Fu Zhu and the other 2 escorting him. "Eh? This old man has fair skin and handsome features. Even though he is already old, he has an imposing aura that is comparable to a gigolo." Xiaohua muttered in his heart when he saw the Fu family's patriarch Fu Yunbu's appearance. -5. Chapter 1469. "So this is the handsome disciple that my Fu clan recruited today?" Fu Yunbu asked with a smile on his face. His gaze swept across Xiaohua and Yingqing as he asked. "Junior Xiaohua and Yingqing greet Senior Fu." Xiaohua and Yingqing didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly bowed. "Rise!" Fu Yunbo waved his sleeves and stopped the 2 from bowing. He smiled and said, "It's not easy to be praised by Elder Fu Feng. Let this old man see what you're capable of." However, when his gaze fell on Yingqing's face, he paused for a moment. Then, he looked at Xiaohua and asked, "You're Xiaohua?" "Yes, this junior is Xiaohua," Xiaohua hurriedly replied. "According to Elder Lu Yun's message, with your qi refining stage for cultivation, you almost succeeded in refining the confinement talisman?" "He, Patriarch, Elder Lu Yun's words are not false. Xiaohua has already attempted to refine the confinement talisman here. In my humble opinion, you only need to teach Xiaohua the method of writing the confinement talisman, and he will be able to refine it easily," Fu Feng said with a smile. As expected, you're making things difficult for this old man." Fu Yunbu smiled and said, "Elder Lu Yun really gave this old man a difficult problem. Patriarch, although Xiaohua can refine the confinement talisman, it's still far from being comparable to Yingqing." The Fu puppet couldn't help but say, "Just now, we saw with our own eyes that he was actually able to refine the 5 elemental yellow talisman. Moreover, Every single one of them was a mid-grade yellow talisman. This kind of miraculous skill. I'm afraid that even our Fu clan rarely sees it, right? Ah? The 5 elemental return to origin technique? Fu Yunbo was also moved and said, although our Fu clan is passed down through the generations, this kind of miraculous talisman crafting technique is the Fu clan's secret technique. The other talisman crafting clans that were as famous as our Fu clan have all declined in recent years. This kind of talisman crafting technique is probably extinct outside of the Fu clan. I really didn't expect you to know it. 5 elemental pearl! The Fu puppet suddenly exclaimed. I remember now, this seems to be my Fu clan's secret talisman crafting technique. He patted his hand and took out a damaged book from his storage pouch. He handed it over to Fu Yinbo and said, reporting to Patriarch, this junior obtained this talisman crafting method by chance in my early years. This junior didn't know which family senior spoke of left it behind. It was precisely because of this talisman crafting technique that I thought of joining the Fu clan and properly practicing the Tao of talisman crafting. Oh? I see. Fu Yunbo unceremoniously took it and casually flipped through it before handing it back to him. He nodded and said, if I'm not mistaken, this talisman crafting method was left behind by the Liao family. The Liao family had already declined 100 years ago, and their disciples have never been heard of in the country of Shi. He Fu was really lucky to be able to obtain such a precious talisman crafting method. It's a pity that the content in this book is still incomplete. This junior can only learn this much, and has not made any progress for many years. Fu Puppet echoed. Just by relying on this damaged book, He Fu was able to cultivate the 5 elemental pearl. He Fu's talisman crafting aptitude must be outstanding. I'm afraid this skyward pavilion won't be able to keep him. It's better to let him directly enter the inner courtyard, Fu Feng suggested. This is still up to He Fu to decide. Fu Yinbo nodded and said, I also love He Fu's talent. However, to enter the inner courtyard, he must be a disciple of the Fu clan. He Fu must change his surname to the Fu clan. Otherwise, he can only practice in the skyward pavilion. He Fu, why aren't you thanking the Patriarch? Even for a direct disciple of the Fu clan, it's difficult to enter the inner courtyard. The Fu puppet hurriedly reminded. This? Fu puppet said awkwardly. Shopkeeper Fu has already told me when I was in Jinghua City, but I haven't thought of changing my surname yet. I hope the Patriarch can tolerate me for a few days and allow me to think about it. Haha, it's fine, it's fine. The reason why the Fu clan has always been standing among the cultivation families in the country of Shi with the talisman crafting technique, and not decline like the Liao clan, is because the Fu clan seeks common ground while reserving differences. If He Fu wants to stay in the Fu clan will welcome him with open arms. If He Fu doesn't want to stay in the Fu clan, you can leave at any time. Moreover, as long as you stay in the Fu clan and craft talismans for the Fu clan will reward you according to your hard work. There are many talisman crafting techniques that are hard to find in the cultivation world, and He Fu will have the opportunity to see them. Thank you, Patriarch. Fu Puppet was overjoyed and bowed. I've heard that the Fu clan is so open-minded, and that's why I joined the Fu clan. The Patriarch's words have enlightened me. I will think about it carefully and try to repay the Patriarch as soon as possible. Great! Fu Yinbo clapped his hands and said, the Fu clan will open its doors and welcome you at any time. Then, Fu Yinbo looked at Xiao Hua and said with a smile, Xiao Hua's situation is different but also the same. Without the method of writing the confinement talisman, Xiao Hua can only craft the intermediate grade fireball talisman, which is no different from the average talisman craftsman of the Fu clan. However, with the method of writing the confinement talisman, Xiao Hua can immediately stand shoulder to shoulder with the high-grade talisman craftsman of the Fu clan. However, the method of writing the confinement talisman is of course another way for the Fu clan. Similarly, it can only be taught to the inner court disciples of the Fu clan. As for the talisman craftsmen of the Skyward Pavilion, they can only teach it after they have made a great contribution to the Fu clan and have sworn not to divulge it to others. Don't you think this is making things difficult for me? Xiaohua smiled and said, I know how precious the method of writing is. I don't ask to be taught the method of writing now. I will first craft the fireball talisman in the skyward pavilion. It won't be too late to teach it when the patriarch feels that I am qualified. Great! Fu Yinhua clapped his hands again and said, Xiaohua's tranquil temperament is a good material for cultivation. Xiaohua, you can also consider entering the inner court. My Fu clan welcomes you at any time. Che, I didn't think so much. Xiaohua said in his heart and replied, Thank you for the patriarch's kindness. I will also consider it. Good. Fu Yinhua stood up and smiled. My Fu clan has gathered many talents in the past few days. This is a sign of great prosperity. Fu Feng, you have to work hard and arrange for these talents well. Even if there is something inappropriate, you have to arrange it well. Don't let others think that my Fu clan is stingy. Yes, I will obey the patriarch's order. Fu Feng stood up and replied. Fu Zhu? You have already sent He Fu and Xiaohua here. Why are you still not patrolling the mountains? Do not disturb Elder Fu's work. Fu Yinhua said. Yes, I will go and patrol the mountains now. Fu Zhu smiled and said, However, you have to confirm that I am He Fu's senior sister. No, Patriarch, I was the one who brought He Fu into Golden Mount Hua. I am He Fu's senior sister. Fu Zhu immediately shouted. Fu Zhu, He Fu followed me into Skyward Pavilion. If I am not his senior sister, who will be his senior sister? Fu Zhu smiled and said. Xiaohua, who was at the side, looked at them in astonishment. He didn't know what they were fighting for. Isn't she just a senior sister? Ha ha. Fu Yinhua laughed and pointed with his finger. He Fu, Xiaohua, are you guys confused? Yes, I don't understand. Xiaohua and He Fu both bowed and said, In order to let the talisman masters of Skyward Pavilion integrate into my Fu clan quickly and get more help from my Fu clan has a rule. Fu Yinhua said, If a talisman master is brought into Skyward Pavilion by a Fu clan disciple, then they are the senior sister or senior brother of the talisman master. If the talisman master has any problems in the Fu clan, he can ask this senior sister or senior brother. He can even ask them about talisman crafting. So that's how it is. Xiaohua glanced at the beautiful twin sisters and said inwardly, These two can be considered I's senior sisters, but why don't they want me? I was the one who took He Fu's token. I am He Fu's senior sister. Fu Zhu's face showed some anger. But He Fu followed me into Skyward Pavilion. Fu Zhu did not give in. Of course I pulled He Fu in. You guys were just walking in front. Fu Zhu argued. All right. Fu Yinhua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He waved his hand and said, You guys don't need to fight anymore. I have decided for you guys. Fu Zhu, and Fu Zhu are He Fu and Xiaohua's senior sisters. If He Fu and Xiaohua have any difficulties in the Fu clan, they can look for these three senior sisters. Thank you, Patriarch. Although Fu Zhu was unwilling, she could only lower her head. Fu Zhu smiled and thanked Fu Yinhua. It's good to be young. Fu Yinhua sighed and quickly left. Farewell, Patriarch. Fu Zhu and the others smiled. Forget it. Quickly settle your junior brothers down and go patrol the mountain. Fu Yinhua smiled and waved his hand. The talisman masters of the Fu clan were arranged around Skyward Pavilion. According to the rank of the talisman master, they were given different rooms. High-level talisman masters were given a pavilion, while low-level talisman masters were given a simple house. There were even some that looked very simple and crude. Needless to say, Xiaohua was barely given a small house compared to the talisman masters of the Fu clan. However, He Fu was different. He was already considered a high-level talisman master, and was naturally given an independent pavilion. However, when Fu Zhu led him to a pavilion and instructed the disciples of Skyward Pavilion to bring Xiaohua out, he said, That senior sister Fu Zhu, Xiaohua came to Jinhua Mountain together with this younger brother. No matter how you look at it, it's fate. From what Elder Fu Feng said, he was only given a small room. You see, this younger brother's pavilion is quite big. Is it possible to let Xiaohua live together with this younger brother? On one hand, we are all senior sisters' junior brothers and it is convenient for you to give pointers. On the other hand, although Xiaohua is not a high-level talisman master now, as long as he makes a certain contribution to the Fu clan, he will definitely become a high-level talisman master in the future. It is not fair to let him live in a small house now. When Fu Zhu heard this, her face revealed a look of approval. She clapped her hands and said, I didn't expect junior brother He Fu to be so broad-minded and loving. This really makes senior sister happy. How can my Fu clan not agree to this kind of request? The Skyward Pavilion disciple next to her opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He was very clear about the status of Fu Zhu and the others. He had no reason to block their interest. -5. Chapter 1470. Xiaohua, why aren't you thanking He Fu for his kindness? The Fu puppet didn't want to be outdone, and quickly ordered Xiaohua. Xiaohua naturally knew what He Fu puppet meant, and secretly cursed the Fu puppet. Do I lack this? You want me to be your shield for no reason? However, he lowered his head and thought for a moment before cupping his hands. Since that's the case, I thank senior brother He for his kindness. I hope I won't disturb senior brother's peace here. Don't mention it. He Fu puppet smiled. You and I should support each other and improve together. Fu Zhu also said, Yes, Xiaohua, when you're free, you should ask He Fu for advice. Just now, senior sister also saw the yellow talisman you refined. To be honest, your basic skills are still lacking. Even if I give you the method to write the confinement talisman, you may not be able to refine it. Senior sister is right. Xiaohua's face was respectful, but his heart was disdainful. The Fu puppet also scolded. Next to the pavilion is a quiet room dedicated to making talismans. If you're free, Xiaohua can practice more. The three senior sisters' performance in front of He Fu puppet made Xiaohua feel uncomfortable. He Fu puppet smiled and said, Senior sisters, it's getting late. This mountain, do we still need to patrol? Oh, of course. Fu Zhu was the first to shout. Let's go, or the clan master will be angry. As she spoke, she urged her transcendence energy and flew into the air. Then she turned her head and smiled extremely gracefully. Junior brother He, rest for now. When senior sister is done with my duty, I'll come and see you. Senior sisters, the days ahead are still long. He Fu puppet also politely returned the courtesy. His words made the three senior sisters' hearts warm. After Fu Zhu and the others left, the Skyward Pavilion disciple led the two into the house, explained a few things, and also left. He Fu puppet looked around and smiled. Junior brother Xiao, why do I feel that you look familiar? Have we met somewhere before? Xiaohua had already thought about it in his heart. He frowned and pondered for a moment before saying, Senior martial brother He, you're right. I also feel that senior martial brother looks familiar. You look like a rogue cultivator I saw at Jinghua City's EG. Is that so? Song Ying's expression did not change as he asked curiously. I am from Jinghua City. What a coincidence! Xiaohua lightly shook his head and said, Little brother has forgotten that fellow Taoist's name, but he's an artificer and doesn't know how to craft talismans at all. Furthermore, that fellow Taoist is in the 7th or 8th layer of the aura refining realm, while senior martial brother He is only in the 5th layer. No matter what, it can't be the fellow Taoist I saw. Yes, that's true. I am also very interested in you as a fellow Taoist. If there is a chance in the future, you can introduce me to you, Song Ying said with a smile. Xiaohua still shook his head. I haven't been to Jinghua City for a long time. Who knows if I'll run into it again? Let's leave it to fate. Gongda patted Xiaohua's shoulder. Your cultivation is insufficient, and you don't have the skill to refine yellow talismans. You can only refine middle-grade fireball talismans in a short period of time. This contribution to the Fu clan is still limited. If I have the chance, I'll teach you more about the Tao of talisman crafting. Many thanks, Senior Marshal Brother He, Xiaohua said with a face full of joy. All right, this pavilion has 2 floors. I'll live on the upper floor. You'll have to suffer the inconvenience of living on the lower floor. It's better than a small house. Yes, little brother also has the same idea, Xiaohua echoed. Soon after, Xiaohua settled down in the Fu clan of Jinhua Mountain. On one hand, he meditated in the pavilion. On the other hand, he found time to refine fireball talismans in the quiet room next to the pavilion. In fact, as a peripheral talisman crafting master of the Fu clan, his job was purely to refine yellow talismans for the Fu clan. However, if one wanted to refine yellow talismans outside, they would have to go to E.G. to trade and purchase talisman ink and talisman paper. In the Fu clan, one only needed to refine a sufficient amount of yellow talismans every day. The Fu clan would give you a corresponding record based on the number of yellow talismans you refined. These records could be exchanged for spirit stones, pills, and the Fu clan's talisman crafting techniques. Xiaohua's focus was on the Fu clan's Yunqing talisman. This thing was in the category of spirit talismans. If Xiaohua didn't have any special methods, it was impossible for him to obtain it. Therefore, he didn't do anything for the time being. Every day, like Xiaohua, he took out a certain amount of time and went to the quiet room to craft talismans. He didn't go behind Xiaohua's back. He used the 5-star alignment technique to refine a fixed number of yellow talismans. Then, when Xiaohua was refining fireball talismans, he gave Xiaohua some pointers. This allowed Xiaohua's talisman brush to refine yellow talismans to improve greatly. He also learned a lot of techniques. Unfortunately, Xiaohua never really used talisman brushes to refine yellow talismans. These improvements weren't very useful to him. Of course, there were many subtle techniques and different ways of thinking that were beneficial to Xiaohua. At least, Xiaohua's icicle talisman could be successfully refined to the middle grade after a month of concentrated practice. However, this wasn't Xiaohua's greatest gain. Xiaohua's greatest gain was the 5-star alignment technique. According to Xiaohua's thinking, the 5-star alignment technique could only be learned if one could refine all 5 elements yellow talismans. Moreover, he was always as quick as a dragonfly skimming the water. It was impossible for Xiaohua to see it clearly. And Xiaohua indeed didn't see it. And Xiaohua didn't see it. However, didn't Xiaohua have that kind of perception? The quiet room for talisman crafting was only so big. Although Xiaohua's perception wasn't as good as his divine sense, he could still clearly perceive the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He also knew how to refine the fireball talisman. With this as a reference, a month's time was enough for Xiaohua to completely learn how to refine the 5 elements yellow talisman. As for those techniques, after Xiaohua learned how to refine the 5 elements yellow talisman, he abandoned the talisman brush and used his 10 fingers to try it out. It was very easy for him to successfully refine it. Moreover, according to Xiaohua's understanding, the 5-star alignment technique was a gimmick. In fact, it was a different approach to the same result as the writing method of the imprisonment talisman. However, during the refining process, the last stroke of the 5 elements yellow talisman was only slightly delayed by the use of transcendence energy. The opposite yellow talisman was also drawn in the air. These talisman characters were just floating in the air, waiting for him to use the technique to enter the talisman paper. However, when Xiaohua truly used the 5-star alignment technique to completely refine the 5 elements yellow talisman, the gimmick that he disdained made him unexpectedly happy. Why? Because the 5 elements yellow talisman refined using the 5-star alignment technique contained a very uniform amount of spiritual qi of heaven and earth. The quality of the 5 yellow talismans were completely the same. In other words, although Xiaohua's icicle talisman was only a middle-grade talisman, and the wood life talisman was also a middle-grade talisman. However, under the leadership of his top-grade fireball talisman, all of the 5 elements yellow talismans had reached the high-grade realm. Good heavens, this young master still underestimated others! When Xiaohua saw that he had refined the low-grade 5 elements yellow talismans to the high grade, he couldn't help but suddenly realize that although the refining method of the 5 elements yellow talisman was rare, compared to the 5-star alignment technique, it really wasn't worth mentioning. This was because the 5-star alignment technique could overcome the problem of a talisman master's physique. It could evenly distribute the quality of the talisman master's most proficient talisman to the other yellow talismans. This might not be too conspicuous among the low-grade yellow talismans, but what if the 5-star alignment technique was used to refine the high-grade 5 elements yellow talisman? Even the 5 elements spirit talisman? That was an incredible matter. It was no wonder that the Fu family head Fu Yunbo was so shocked when he saw that Song Ying could use the 5-star alignment technique. This Song Ying is also strange. He came here to take revenge and even accidentally concealed his identity? How could he not attract the attention of others? Xiaohua didn't understand Song Ying's actions. However, it didn't matter if Xiaohua didn't understand. In this 1 month, Song Ying's relationship with Fu Zhu, Fu Ho, and Fu Zhu became clearer and more complicated. At first, the 3 of them came very frequently, but as if they had a tacit understanding with each other, they came at different times. Later, the 3 of them came at different times. Fu Zhu and Fu Ho still came often, but Fu Ho's frequency gradually decreased, but she still came. After another 10 days, Fu Zhu came less and less. Instead, it was Fu Ho who came often, and every time, her face was red and her eyes were filled with sweetness. Good heavens, this is also junior brothers! Why is there such a difference in treatment? Xiaohua, who had been ignored by his 3 senior sisters as soon as he arrived at Jinhua Mountain, often saw Fu Ho flying over and skipping into the courtyard. He couldn't help but rub his nose and smile bitterly. Every time these senior sisters came to visit, Xiaohua would tactfully avoid them. He would either go to the quiet room to craft talismans or go to other talisman masters to ask for advice. Of course, Xiaohua's tactfulness also made Song Ying return the favor. Occasionally, when he gave pointers on the fireball talisman, Song Ying would refine some high-level iron cloak talisman and Vajra talisman for Xiaohua. One time, after Fu Ho left, Song Ying actually refined the flying sword talisman in the quiet room. Admittedly, he didn't succeed, but it opened Xiaohua's eyes. He remembered most of the talisman characters of the flying sword talisman. At the same time, Xiaohua gradually understood the reason why Song Ying was so lively with these senior sisters. With these cheap master's pointers, and also telling Song Ying the precious yellow talisman refining technique, how could Song Ying's talisman refining technique not improve? When Xiaohua mastered the 5-star alignment technique, Song Ying had also refined the 5-element yellow talisman to the high level. On this day, the Fu Ho came again. Xiaohua had just left, and was about to seek guidance from the nearby talisman master when he saw the Skyward Pavilion's disciple, Fu Shan, walking over with a gloomy face. Xiaohua, why did you come out instead of refining talismans in the quiet room? Fu Shan scolded as soon as he saw Xiaohua. Xiaohua frowned slightly. After interacting with the nearby talisman masters for the past month, he had a rough understanding of the status of talisman masters in the Fu clan. If they weren't high-ranking talisman masters, they would be lower than the disciples of the Fu clan. Fu Shan's attitude was very common in the Fu clan. I have already finished my homework for today and refined the fireball talisman that the Fu clan needs. Why do you still want me to refine talismans in the quiet room? Xiaohua indifferently argued. Fu Shan sneered. I knew you're a useless piece of trash. Why can't you refine yellow talismans with the time you spend touring the mountains and playing with the rivers? If you only rely on your ability to refine confinement talismans, you'll forever be a mediocre talisman master. -5. Chapter 1471. So what if I don't refine confinement talismans? Even if it's fireball talismans, it's enough. Xiaohua sneered. Besides, why must I refine talismans? Refining pills and tools, which one can't I refine? Fu Shan looked at Xiaohua as if he had seen a monster. He raised his head and laughed. It's really funny, really funny. Why would a cultivator with a different surname join my Fu clan? Don't you want to rely on my Fu clan to become a talisman master of my Fu clan and then have a chance to enter the inner court? To change your name and become a disciple of the Fu clan? Ha ha ha! Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, Fellow Taoist, Fu is right. I have taken a fancy to your Fu clan's female disciples and want to find a beautiful dual cultivation partner. What are you going to do about it? Seeing Fu Shan's increasingly gloomy face, Xiaohua rubbed his chin and pretended to think. But what about Ai's 3 senior sisters? They have the looks and the figures. Even if they don't have the looks and figure, their status is also excellent. How can I not be tempted? You brat! You dare! Fu Shan couldn't bear it anymore and reached out to grab Xiaohua's collar. Xiaohua didn't dodge at all and leaned forward with a smile. What's wrong? You want to fight? Fellow Taoist Fu, even if you fight again, can you stop Ai's 3 senior sisters from coming to the Skyward Pavilion? You! Fu Shan was so angry that his hands were trembling, but his outstretched hand didn't fall down. Wait and see. Xiaohua! Fu Shan's face was livid. He turned around and walked away. After walking far away, he turned back and said, All the new talisman masters this year must come to the Skyward Pavilion before noon. Elder Fu Feng has orders. Xiaohua, don't be late. Damn it, it's almost noon, how can I not be late? Xiaohua cursed and hastily returned to the front of the pavilion. Before he even entered the door, he shouted loudly, Senior brother hurry! We have to gather at the Skyward Pavilion at noon. Elder Fu Feng has something to instruct us. Xiaohua was afraid that the talisman puppet had used some kind of restriction. Just as he was about to go up, he saw Tsong Ying and the talisman puppet coming down from the 2nd floor one after the other. Tsong Ying's face was flushed red, and the talisman puppet's eyes were also full of love. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were watery and full of affection. Don't be nervous, Xiaohua. Today is the full moon for all of you. It should be the senior brother who will give you pointers on your cultivation and talisman crafting. It's not a big deal, the Fu puppet said with a smile. Oh? There's such a thing? Xiaohua was surprised. Can't Shiji give us pointers on cultivation and talisman crafting? Our duties are different from the assigned senior brothers. Previously, when you first arrived at Mount Jinhua, we were worried that you would not be able to adapt to Mount Jinhua and would not know how to solve some problems. That was why you came to us. Generally speaking, we won't answer questions about talisman crafting and cultivation that are too profound. And now, the senior brothers that will be assigned will be determined based on your performance in this month and the specific situation of your cultivation. For example, you can only craft fireball talismans, and your cultivation is only at the 4th layer of Qi refining. And there's also the possibility that you can craft confinement talismans. In that case, my Fu clan will assign a talisman craftsman who is proficient in both fireball talismans and confinement talismans to guide you. The talisman puppet explained to Xiaohua while walking. As for Tsong Ying, he seemed to already know. Although he had a smile on his face, his eyes were full of disdain. With a dang sound, the talisman puppet frowned. It's for real? After 10 chimes, you must come to Skyward Pavilion. Otherwise, you will be punished according to the clan's rules. Let's go, you all follow behind me and fly. The talisman puppet called out and directly flew towards Skyward Pavilion. Flying was forbidden in Mount Jinhua's courtyard. As soon as the talisman puppet flew up, a patrolling disciple came over. However, when they saw that the person flying was a talisman puppet, they all smiled bitterly and moved their faces to the side. With the talisman puppet leading the way, Xiaohua and Tsong Ying finally entered Skyward Pavilion after the 9th chime. Elder Fu Feng was sitting cross-legged on a praying mat. When he saw Xiaohua and Tsong Ying enter, his expression didn't change. Beside him, Fu Shan's eyes were somewhat ruthless as he struck the last chime. Fu Shan, all the new talisman craftsmen this year have arrived, right? Fu Feng looked at the dozens of cultivators in the hall and asked in a clear voice. Reporting to the pavilion master, All 84 new talisman craftsmen this year have arrived. Fu Shan respectfully said. Good, take the pavilion's token and invite the inner court disciples here. Fu Feng nodded. Yes, disciple obeys. After Fu Shan left, Fu Feng lowered his head to look at the 84 cultivators in the hall and said with a smile, Everyone here is the backbone of our Fu clan's talisman craftsmen. Presumably, during this month, you have already adapted to our Fu clan's lifestyle and have a deeper understanding of the art of talisman craftsmen. Many of you will definitely want to practice talisman craftsmen. Therefore, our Fu clan will select disciples from the inner court to be assigned to each of you as your senior martial brothers. These senior martial brothers will give you the most pertinent advice based on your level of talisman craftsman and cultivation. Moreover, these senior martial brothers will report the situation to our Fu clan's Council of Elders based on your performance. The Council of Elders will then decide which talisman craftsmen can enter the inner court or obtain higher-level talisman craftsmen and cultivation methods. Wow! When everyone heard this, they all began to whisper to each other. These talisman craftsmen had been in Jinhua Mountain for dozens of days and were already familiar with each other. Even Xiaohua, who didn't like to hang around with others, had also met several low-level talisman craftsmen next to Song Ying's small building. These low-level talisman craftsmen were also standing outside. When they heard Elder Fu Feng's words, they looked around and walked to Xiaohua's side. They cupped their hands and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, this must be the famous fellow Taoist He. Xiaohua understood and quickly smiled at Song Ying. Senior Martial Brother He, these are the talisman craftsmen who live in the small building next to the small building. I usually go and nag them. When they hear about Senior Martial Brothers' talisman crafting techniques, they all admire you very much. Forgive me, forgive me. I am He Fu. Greetings, fellow Taoists. During this time, I was busy crafting talismans in the quiet room and didn't get close to you all. When Song Ying heard this, he immediately cupped his hands and said with a smile on his face, I am Yi Shiguang. Greetings, fellow Taoist He. I am Ming Jing. Greetings, fellow Taoist He. The two fifth-layer aura refining cultivators very happily cupped their hands in return. Fellow Taoist Ye's Ice Thorn Talisman is already close to being a high-grade talisman. I really admire your technique. Xiaohua echoed from the side. Fellow Taoist Ming's Fireball Talisman is also better than I's. If Senior Martial Brother He interacts more with you too, he'll definitely benefit a lot. We don't dare. How can we compare to fellow Taoist He? When the two heard Xiaohua's evaluation, their faces turned slightly red. They could show off in front of Xiaohua, but how could they dare to be arrogant in front of a talisman craftsman who could use the 5-star alignment? You flatter me. Everyone has their shortcomings and strengths. We talisman craftsmen should learn from each other's strengths to make up for our shortcomings. Only by learning from other talisman craftsmen can we improve. Song Ying said very warmly with a smile on his face. Xiaohua couldn't help but feel envious when he saw Song Ying's relaxed expression. No wonder this pretty boy won the favor of talisman puppets and the others. Sure enough, his words are filled with honey. Even the male cultivators who just met him were fooled by him, not to mention the female cultivators who relied on his looks. When Elder Fu Feng, who was sitting at the head of the skyward pavilion, saw that the talisman craftsmen below were discussing with their heads lowered, he didn't stop them and only watched with a calm expression. After the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, Fu Shan returned from outside. He was closely followed by a group of Fu clan disciples who were around the 8th layer of the Qi refining realm. These disciples proudly entered and walked in front of Fu Shan. They lined up in several rows and bowed to Fu Shan in unison. All right, everyone, please stop discussing. These Fu clan disciples are the elites of our Fu clan's inner court. They have profound attainments in both talisman crafting and cultivation. If you have anything you don't understand in the future, you can ask them for guidance. Fu Shan, read the name list once, then let the disciples take these talisman craftsmen to the place where they'll cultivate in the future. Yes, disciple understands. When Fu Shan finished speaking, Fu Feng flung his sleeve and turned around to leave the skyward pavilion. Soon after, according to Fu Shan's list, Xiaohua and a female cultivator named Xianlan were assigned to help senior martial brother Fu Min. Moreover, Song Qing was different from the rest. His assigned senior martial brother was not selected from the inner court disciples, but directly chosen by Elder Fu Feng. Seeing Song Cheng's eyes flickering with joy or uneasiness as he left, Xiaohua waited for Xianlan and Fu Min to arrive. Xianlan was a female cultivator with an ordinary appearance. Her face was slightly plump, but this was only the layer of swelling on her face. Her body was actually as straight as a stick, just like the Fu clan disciple named Fu Ma. Xiaohua's eyes swept over Xuanlan's body, then lost interest in looking at her. Xianlan, this is simply a waste of this wonderful name. Even if she doesn't have the gentleness of an orchid, she should still have the temperament of an orchid. How come it doesn't match at all? Maybe she has the wisdom of an orchid? Or an elegant character? Let's wait and see. As for Fu Min, he was a fat man of average height. His big belly made his Taoist robe bulge up high, and the fat on his cheeks jiggled. However, this person's forehead was quite high, and his eye sockets were deep, giving him a wise appearance. You're Xiaohua? Fu Min, led by Xianlan, arrived in front of Xiaohua. Greetings, Senior Martial Brother Fu. I am Xiaohua. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent, and hurriedly saluted. Why is your cultivation so poor? You just passed the 4th level of qi refining? Fu Min frowned and said, There's still a long way to go before you reach the 5th level of qi refining. Yes, my aptitude is not good enough, that's why I considered making talismans. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. You think talisman making is easy? Fu Min sneered and said, I don't know how you entered my Fu clan. Look at your senior martial sister Xianlan. Her cultivation has reached the middle of the 5th level of qi refining, a whole level higher than yours. Only with this kind of cultivation can you make better talismans. Xiaohua was speechless. Is this a show of strength? Xianlan smiled and said, Junior Martial Brother Xiao, Senior Martial Brother Fu is right. Think about it, if you don't have a solid cultivation, even if you know how to make yellow talismans, what's the use? It's impossible for you to refine a suitable yellow talisman. -5. Chapter 1472. Seeing Xianlan say a lot of things, mixed with countless. Think about it. Xiaohua felt a headache coming on. Think about it, only with Senior Brother Fu Min's guidance can we make further progress. Xianlan concluded. Think about it, shouldn't we thank Senior Brother Fu Min? Yes. Of course. I agree wholeheartedly. Xiaohua finally let out a sigh of relief and smiled apologetically. Let's go, don't be so talkative. Fu Min scolded softly. If you can make progress and make greater contributions to the Fu family, my face will also be bright. After speaking, he left the skyward pavilion first. Young master, this is called talkative. Xiaohua's eyes narrowed as he looked at Fu Min's fat body with some anger. Why aren't you leaving? Xianlan called out to Xiaohua and quickly chased after him. At this time, there was no one left in the skyward pavilion. Only Fu Shan, who was standing in the distance next to the praying mat, had a complacent look on his face. He looked at Xiaohua's back with a smile. In the past 10 days, Fu Shan felt as if each day had been a year. He did not know what was going on. In the past, the Fu puppet did not pay any attention to him, but it was not to the point of being cold to him. Whenever there was an invitation, it would accept it. Even if it was some rare and small gift, it would accept it without hesitation. But in this period of time, the Fu puppet's attitude towards him was completely different. It was as if Fu Shan was invisible and didn't see him at all. The Fu puppet's whereabouts were also somewhat mysterious. Fu Shan couldn't see her, and even if he wanted to ask for the reason, he couldn't. Fu Shan naturally paid attention to the small buildings that fit the criteria, but other than the frequent visits of the Fu puppet, Fu Zhu and the Fu puppet rarely went, so it didn't have much to do with the criteria. Thinking about how his path to a side branch of the Fu family was blocked like this, Fu Shan was naturally resentful. But with the protection of Fu Zhu and the Fu puppet, Fu Shan could only vent his anger on Xiao Hua. Of course, Xiao Hua's words from before were like needles that pierced into his heart, causing him great harm. Xiao Hua followed Fu Min and Xian Lan out of the skyward pavilion and followed the mountain path to a cave. The cave was not big, but it was very neat and tidy. Several moonstones were embedded in the walls of the cave. There was a cloud bed in the cave with a praying mat on top of it. There was also a stone table leaning against the mountain wall and 3 stone stools beside it. Fu Min smiled and said, "This is where I used to refine yellow talismans. Later on, when I entered the inner courtyard, I also taught my junior brothers here." Xian Lan looked around and said happily, "This cave is very clean and tidy. I think Senior Martial Brother Fu often used this place. There aren't many male cultivators who are as meticulous as Senior Martial Brother Fu. Even female cultivators like us only focus on cultivation, so we're far inferior to Senior Martial Brother in terms of details." Fu Min's face showed a trace of pride and said with a smile, "Because I have to teach my junior brothers every year. Even if we don't have any status as master and disciple, I feel that as long as I teach them, I have to do my best. Otherwise, I might as well not do it. Senior Martial Brother is right. Think about it, Senior Martial Brother's time is very precious, and he still has to waste it on us. If we don't properly practice, then we'll be letting down Senior Martial Brother's painstaking efforts." As she said that, she turned to Xiao Hua and asked, "Don't you think so?" "Of course." Xiao Hua looked around the stone walls and frowned. He asked tentatively, "Senior Martial Brother Fu, this cave seems to have a strange smell. How can that be?" Xian Lan pretended to be surprised. "Think about it, Senior Martial Brother Fu cleaned this place so well, how can it be? Why can't I smell it?" "Oh, Xiao Hua is probably talking about the smell of sulfur." Fu Min waved his hand and said, "There's an earth fire under this Mount Jinhua. Previously, my Fu clan seniors wanted to use it to refine pills, but the quality of the earth fire wasn't good enough, and the techniques for refining pills were rare. Alchemy furnaces were even harder to find, so after trying for 100 years, they gave up." "Earth fire?" Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Mount Jinhua actually has an earth fire? Then the Fu clan should definitely try refining pills. 100 years' time is really too short. It's really a pity that it's abandoned like this." "Pity?" Fu Min shook his head and said, "That's what Senior Martial Brother thought. However, as the saying goes, everyone has their own specialization. This saying is true for people, but it's also true for cultivator families. My Fu clan's talisman refining technique is passed down through the generations. As long as we can ensure that our talisman refining technique is everlasting, we can safely survive in the cultivation world." Seeing Xiao Hua and Xuanlan's pondering expression, Fu Min became even more proud. He pointed to the east side of the cave and said, "Back then, the previous clan head put his mind on refining pills, hoping to raise the prestige and strength of my Fu clan to another level. Maybe you guys don't know, but 20% of the stone walls on the east side of Mount Jinhua had the earth fire drawn into the cave by refining masters. The scene was very spectacular, but what was the result? After all, my Fu clan wasn't Xuanyan's school. How could we have so much energy and strength to both refine pills and make talismans? Although we could refine some low-level pills, we were still far from being able to compare to the real alchemy families. As a result, not only did we not succeed in refining pills, but our talisman refining technique also fell behind by a lot. The Fu clan almost fell. If it wasn't for the current clan head standing out and unexpectedly imprisoning the previous clan head, Xiao Hua and Xianlan, I'm afraid that the two of you wouldn't be here today as talisman masters. So that's how it is." Xiao Hua secretly nodded in his heart. He somewhat understood the hatred that was mentioned in Yunxi Lake. "By the way, Senior Brother Fu, I heard that the Liao clan of Mount Gung was as famous as the Fu clan. Just after the Fu clan declined, they suddenly declined and disappeared in a short period of time. According to some rogue cultivators, the Liao clan seemed to be in trouble because of this pill refining technique. Xianlan suddenly asked. He. Think about it, the Liao clan of Mount Gung was about the same as my Fu clan. How could they suddenly disappear? Naturally, there are some secrets. I only found out a little bit of the truth by chance. Fu Min's face was mysterious and unfathomable. Xiaohua really didn't dare to be interested in these things. He only wanted to know the location of the earth fire. After thinking for a while, he said, Since it's a secret, senior brother Fu should be careful. Oh, by the way, are the abandoned earth fires in the east? Have they been changed to talisman refining places? Fu Min was a little unhappy. He glanced at Xiaohua and said in a strange voice, What? You also want to learn alchemy? It's not that I want to belittle you, but if you can refine pills, why do you want to be a talisman refiner? It's so hard and you can't even improve your cultivation. Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, No, I used to be a rogue cultivator. I only admire alchemy. I don't dare to think about it. I just want to find a quiet place to refine talismans. Although the earth fire has been abandoned, it's not easy to seal it. A lot of heat will come up. It's uncomfortable to stay there, so how can you refine talismans? Don't even think about it. This cave is where I used to refine talismans. In the future you and Xianlan can come here. Fu Min waved his hand and said disdainfully, Senior brother Fu, quickly tell me, what is the secret? I'm very curious. Xianlan asked in a low voice with a face full of curiosity and longing. Looking at Xuanlan's gaze, Fu Min's oily face became more spirited. He waved his hand and said, Sure. This is an absolute secret. Normally, I don't talk about it. You know, I have the best moral character. I never speak ill of others behind their backs, and I never play any tricks. I'm an upright person. That's right. I've long heard of Senior Martial Brother Fu's character. He's a man of great ambition, and disdains to be calculative with others. Think about it, how many people like Senior Martial Brother Fu are there in Jinhua Mountain? It's my honor to meet Senior Brother Fan, Xianlan said with a smile. Her ordinary face actually blushed a little bit, making her look a little bit more beautiful. Unfortunately, it was only a little bit. Not to mention Xiaohua, Fu Min also didn't like her. However, Xianlan flattered him very well, making him really happy. So, he said with a smile, this elder brother is just telling you. You are this elder brother's trusted subordinates. You must not disappoint this elder brother's trust. Confidence? Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had just appointed a senior brother, and he immediately became a confidant. This Fu Min was really smart. And Senior Brother Fu doesn't need to worry about this. Since we are Senior Brother Fu's junior brother and junior sister, of course we will treat Senior Brother Fu as our senior brother. Don't you think so, Xiaohua? Xianlan actually forced Xiaohua to state his position. Xiaohua nodded while sniffing. He wanted to ask where the sulfur smell came from. Fu Min heard Xuanlan's declaration of loyalty, and was already happy. He looked at Xiaohua as if he was a close friend. Seeing that Xiaohua was absent-minded, he was slightly angry. He put on a fake smile and said, Some people, even if you treat them as family, they won't care about you. It's really bad luck to meet such people. When Xiaohua heard this, his face slightly changed. He didn't want to hear any so-called privacy, nor was he curious about any so-called secrets. However, since Fu Min wanted him to say it, then let this guy perform. Thus, Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, This one will also listen to Senior Brother Fu's opinion. Humph. Fu Min rolled her eyes at Xiaohua and turned to Xianlan. Xianlan, you said that Gung Mountain's Liao family was exterminated because of alchemy. But do you know where their alchemy techniques and alchemy furnaces came from? Xianlan was confused and whispered, This one, how can this one guess? Xiaohua's heart thumped. Since Fu Min said so, who wouldn't be able to guess it? Even if it wasn't the Fu family, it should be related to the Fu family. Sure enough, Fu Min lowered her voice and said, Gung Mountain's Liao family's alchemy techniques and alchemy furnaces all belong to my Fu family. How is this possible? Xianlan was shocked and said, The Liao family isn't stupid. How can they believe the Fu family? If there is such a good thing, why didn't the Fu family use it and let the Liao family benefit? -5. Chapter 1473. Fu Min enjoyed Xuanlan's surprise and said proudly, Of course they wouldn't believe it if it was given away for no reason. Think about it, how could the Liao clan of Gung Mountain be trusted? This? Xianlan thought for a long time and shook her head with a bitter smile. Senior Fu, how could I think of such a profound problem with my little brain? Why don't you tell me earlier? Think about it again. If the previous head of the Fu clan suddenly disappeared and he was in charge of alchemy and the current head of the Fu clan was in charge of making talismans, then who would believe that alchemy was like poison to the Fu clan? Senior Fu, I finally understand, Xianlan said with a longing face. The head of the Fu clan secretly sent people to give the alchemy technique and furnace to the Liao clan of Gung Mountain under the name of the previous head of the Fu clan. He said that these things were excellent, but someone in the Fu clan didn't agree, so he had no choice but to give them to the Liao clan. Haha, you are finally enlightened! Fu Min laughed. What you said is basically correct. However, there was no need to go through so much trouble. The head of the Fu clan only sent these things to Gung Mountain under the name of the previous head of the Fu clan. He said that he would let the Liao clan keep them for safekeeping and that he would return them after he took over the position of the head of the Fu clan. Xianlan nodded slightly. But later on, the previous head of the Fu clan disappeared, so the alchemy technique and furnace were given to the Liao clan for free. How could the Liao clan not be tempted when they received these genuine items? Coincidentally, the Liao clan's Gung Mountain also had earth fire, so it was inevitable that they would repeat the same mistake as the Fu clan 100 years ago. The Liao clan probably didn't have someone as courageous as the current head of the Fu clan, who dared to cut his losses and pick up talisman making. They could only walk further and further down the path of alchemy and finally exterminate the Fu clan. The head of the Fu clan had a good plan, a good plot. Xianlan, you are absolutely right. It is also extremely far-fetched. Fu Min clapped her hands and said, The alchemy technique and the alchemy cauldron were only left at Gung Mountain by my Fu clan. We didn't allow them to open it, but they actually took it for themselves. How can this be my Fu clan's responsibility? Alas, in short, the Liao family, which was as famous as the Fu family, has now disappeared. There is one less family that can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Fu family, Xianlan said faintly. Fu Min shrugged. Natural selection is nothing more than that. Xiaohua stood by the side and listened quietly. When Fu Min mentioned about the Liao clan's extermination, he knew that this matter must have something to do with the Liao clan and the Fu clan's pill refining techniques. However, he was just like Xianlan. He didn't expect that the Fu clan didn't say anything and only sent these things to Gung Mountain. The Liao clan was like a moth flying into a flame. But what about those alchemy techniques and pill furnaces? Xiaohua's thoughts were different from Xianlan's. However, he also knew that with Fu Min's status, she would definitely not know about these things. What? Xiaohua, don't you understand? Seeing that Xiaohua seemed to have some doubts, Fu Min smiled and said, These things are a bit deep for you. You better properly study talisman crafting. That's right, draw one of the fireball talismans that you usually refine. Let me see if there are any flaws. Okay, Senior Fu, please wait a moment. Xiaohua glanced at the slightly absent-minded Xianlan and took out talisman brushes, ink and other items from his storage pouch. The items he used in the Fu clan's quiet room were all high-grade items. However, Xiaohua didn't bring them out. Of course, the items he used now were the low-grade items from before. As soon as she saw Xiaohua's items, Fu Min pointed out. Xiaohua, I can see that you haven't been taught how to craft talismans. The first rule of talisman crafting is if you want to do a good job, you must first sharpen your tools. No matter if it's a high or low grade talisman crafting master, if you can use high grade talisman brushes and ink, you must use high grade ones. All low grade talisman crafting materials can't bring out the full potential of a talisman crafting master. Xiaohua smiled bitterly and secretly said, "This young master wanted to use high grade talismans back then, but I was embarrassed. How could I afford to use them? Now that this young master has no use for them, why would I waste those spirit stones?" However, he said, "Thank you for your guidance, Senior Fu." Fu Min was slightly satisfied with Xiaohua's attitude and said, "Try it out." Xiaohua didn't put it to heart. After all, he could already craft the 5 elements talisman, iron cloak talisman, gold talisman, and flying sword talisman. Crafting a fireball talisman could be considered easy. When Xiaohua finished crafting a middle-grade fireball talisman, he handed it over to Fu Min. Fu Min didn't take it and only asked, "How many years have you been crafting yellow talismans?" Xiaohua was surprised. He thought for a moment and honestly said, "It's only been about 2 years. And then you've only been in my Fu clan for a month." "Senior Fu is right." Xiaohua nodded. "Since it's like this elder brother won't look at your yellow talisman," Fu Min said mysteriously. Senior Fu, why is that?" Xianlan asked curiously. "If you don't look at it, how will you know how Xiaohua's crafting is? Xiaohua hasn't even been crafting yellow talismans for 2 years, he definitely doesn't have enough experience. And he's only been in my Fu clan for a month, he doesn't have any formal training in crafting yellow talismans. This kind of yellow talisman, does this elder brother still need to look at it? Even if it's a middle-grade fireball talisman, it's still abnormally rough." Fu Min shook his head and said, "Moreover, looking at Xiaohua's improper attitude and careless crafting, this elder brother can already determine that this yellow talisman is definitely not up to standard. This elder brother needs to put in more effort to guide him in the future." "Brilliant! Senior Fu is indeed an expert." Xianlan gave a thumbs up and praised. "And you should craft one too." Fu Min turned his head and said to Xianlan. Seeing this, Xiaohua expressionlessly kept the fireball talisman in his storage bag and quietly watched Xuanlan's performance. Xianlan was crafting the weak water talisman. Her crafting technique was indeed standard and her attitude was naturally meticulous. When the weak water talisman was crafted, it was the same as Xiaohua's, a middle-grade one. But after Fu Min took it and carefully looked at it, his mouth was full of praise. Soon after, he said to Xiaohua, "You should go back and craft the fireball talisman again. You still have a lot of potential to be unearthed, and there's a lot of room for improvement in crafting the fireball talisman. This elder brother won't teach you anything else first. In the next 2 days, I'll take a look at your fireball talisman." Then he patted Xiaohua's shoulder and said, "Do well. Coming to my Fu clan to be a talisman crafting master is your best choice. This elder brother thinks highly of you. And many thanks for Senior Fu's encouragement." Xiaohua bowed and thanked him. He turned around and left the cave. Just as Xiaohua turned around the cave entrance, he heard Fu Min whispering from inside the cave. "Qianlun, this elder brother will now teach you the crafting method of the wood life talisman. You have to watch carefully." Xiaohua slightly tilted his head and snorted coldly. He thought to himself, "This guy really has a pig's brain. Calling him a pig's brain is still a pig's brain." Then he raised his head and saw that there wasn't anyone in the sky. With a wave of his hand, he took out an earth escape talisman. His figure flashed, and he directly escaped to the east of Jihua Mountain. Xiaohua had been underground for the time it took to eat a meal before he was blocked by a restriction in front of him. He had no choice but to jump out of the ground. The place where Xiaohua appeared was a relatively desolate place. The surroundings were overgrown with weeds and shrubs. It wasn't a place that the Fu clan's disciples often came to. However, seeing this situation, Xiaohua was secretly delighted. Fu Min had said that the place where the Fu clan refined pills was now abandoned. Presumably, the Fu clan's patriarch had forbidden the Fu clan's disciples to come here. Wasn't this place close to the place where the Fu clan refined pills? Xiao Hua sniffed. The surrounding air was indeed filled with the smell of sulfur. It should be the result of the earth fire leaking out. Thus, Xiao Hua carefully hid his figure and slowly headed towards the mountains to search for him. Eh? There's actually someone patrolling the mountain? As Xiao Hua was walking, he suddenly heard the sound of something breaking through the air. Xiao Hua hurriedly ducked down and hid behind a large mountain rock. When he stealthily peeked out half of his head, he saw Fu Zhu flying through the air. Hee, I haven't seen this senior Fu for a few days. It seems like he withdrew from the competition. What a pity. If I could come here a few more times, I would definitely be able to learn a few more talisman crafting techniques. This young master would also be able to benefit from it. Xiao Hua thought as he slowly walked out from behind the mountain rock and continued forward. However, Fu Zhu didn't fly too far. When she reached the east side, she landed. After looking around, she flew down again. Eh? This senior sister, could it be that she isn't here to patrol the mountain? Xiao Hua was somewhat curious. However, he wasn't in the mood to pry into other people's secrets. He focused on finding the location of the pill refinement. The east side of the Fu clan's Mount Gold had been abandoned for a long time. Moreover, Xiao Hua didn't know what the pill refinement location was like. He could only search according to the appearance of the cave. After searching for a long time, he saw many collapsed caves. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. The Fu clan has earth fire, but they can have many pill refinement furnaces. Since there aren't many pill refinement furnaces, there shouldn't be many caves. Perhaps these collapsed caves were all used for pill refinement in the past. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and looked around. He flew up a little and looked at the surrounding terrain. Then, he landed again and walked towards the center of the collapsed cave without looking back. In the center of the collapsed cave was a depression. It was also a mess. There were green bricks, mountain rocks, and some filthy jade. And the smell of sulfur is even stronger here. Perhaps the earth fire is here. Xiao Hua thought as he channeled his magic power and flew underground. Fortunately, the underground restriction was only around the earth fire. There weren't any restrictions in this depression. After searching for a moment in the sunken area, Xiao Hua saw a slightly intact underground passage. That passage was carved out with great transcendence energy. Although it was pitch black inside, the grooves on the stone walls showed that there used to be moonlight stones here. There's a door! Xiao Hua stepped on the solid mountain rocks in the underground passage. He was secretly delighted. Then, he placed the black iron array in front of him and held the devil's spear in his hand. Step by step, he walked into the depths of the passage. -5. Chapter 1474. The passageway of Mount Jinhua was very spacious and seemed to be very dangerous. However, Xiao Hua gathered his spirit and was as meticulous and careful as the 100-jam peak. Even after he turned a few corners and walked into a huge hall, he still didn't encounter any danger. Xiao Hua stood at one side of the hall. He first released his perception and checked that there was no one else around. Then, he took out some moonstones from his storage pouch and threw them on the four walls of the hall. After that, Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and carefully sized up the hall. The interior of the hall was extremely spacious. There were only a few broken jade tables and chairs. Moreover, they were all tilted to the left and right. Many cobwebs and dust covered these broken things. In the middle of the hall, there was a tall platform with a radius of 10 feet. It was as tall as several people. The specific situation on the platform could not be seen. Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry to get on the platform. He urged his magic power and flew up into the air. He flew around the hall and saw that there was no entrance to go up. Only then did he land on the platform. When he landed on the platform, he used the moonstone's light to see the things on the platform. He couldn't help but be happy. On the platform, in the center, there was an earth fire that was exactly the same as the one in Shang Huaming's alchemy room. Moreover, this earth fire seemed to be bigger than Shang Huaming's. In addition to this earth fire, there were some jade bottles and jade shelves used for alchemy around the platform. There were many things in a mess. Although these things were crooked, they were all in good condition. These were all things that Xiaohua needed. Needless to say, Xiaohua didn't hold back and swept away all the things on the platform that could be used. As of now, the size of the space behind his head had also increased along with Xiaohua's cultivation. Not to mention the things on the high platform, it was more than enough to move the entire hall inside. Of course, this required Xiaohua to have enough magic power. And this space is a bit messy. I need to find some time to carefully tidy it up, Xiaohua involuntarily thought as he sent the things into the space. Next, Xiaohua walked to the side of the earth fire. There was a layer of restriction on the earth fire, but the restriction didn't seem to be very powerful. After a long time, it had already loosened under the impact of the earth fire. Xiaohua used his perception to take a look, then took out the tip of the demonic spear. Using all his strength, he repeatedly stabbed at the damaged area of the restriction, and easily broke the restriction. Immediately after, a heat wave and a thick sulfuric aura gushed out from the earth fire. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. With a wave of his hand, a yellow talisman controlling the earth fire flew out, temporarily suppressing the earth fire under the yellow talisman. My goodness, what's going on with this earth fire? Why isn't it under control? Xiaohua was a little puzzled. He remembered that Shang Huaming's earth fire was very safe in the alchemy room. And maybe the Fu clan didn't obtain the complete alchemy technique, so they can't control the earth fire well. They can only rely on the yellow talisman to suppress it. The yellow talisman's effect is always insufficient. Moreover, there is no one to specially guard the earth fire, which is why the earth fire is wreaking havoc. Xiaohua secretly guessed. It is precisely because of this that this young master's luck came. Otherwise, if Fu Min couldn't smell the sulfuric aura, she wouldn't have said so much. With this idiot's appearance, he still wants to pretend to be profound. After being sold, he still wants to help count the spirit stones. Luckily, this young master and Xianlan are both talisman masters of the Fu clan. If someone outside knew about the grudge between the Fu clan and the Liao clan and spread this matter, I'm afraid that the Liao clan's sons and nephews would also do everything possible to take revenge. Just as he was thinking, the earth fire's brilliance flickered. Oh no, this yellow talisman bought from EG is really useless. Xiaohua quickly took out another yellow talisman and wanted to use it on the earth fire. But at this moment, his finger suddenly moved slightly, and all the magic power in his body rushed towards his finger. Xiaohua's heart moved, and his mind became clear. He didn't control his finger, and sure enough, his finger became very nimble. Not long after, a spell that Xiaohua felt was very familiar with was formed. Xiaohua didn't hesitate to use the spell on the earth fire. In an instant, the heat of the earth fire quickly retreated, and the sulfuric aura also greatly reduced. Ha! Xiaohua's heart was filled with joy, and the spell in his hand didn't stop. Immediately after, another spell was used, and the earth fire rushed out along with the spell. Moreover, the size of the earth fire was freely controlled by the spell. Damn it! My luck finally broke out again. Xiaohua laughed loudly, and somersaulted a few times in the air before landing on the ground. His laughter echoed in the entire hall. Do I have to refine pills now? Xiaohua thought for a moment. Although he felt that it was a little rushed, he had everything he needed, and there was nothing to prepare. Perhaps what he had to do now was to preheat the three-legged phoenix pattern furnace and prepare to refine pills. Preheating also needs time. I have no reason to stay here, but if I leave the furnace here to preheat, how can I be at ease? Besides, I haven't thought about what pills to refine, right? Forget it, I'll come back tomorrow. I'm already overjoyed today. I'll go back and prepare in detail first. Xiaohua thought for a moment, flew down from the high platform, took the moonstone, and walked out of the passage. When Xiaohua came out from the ground, he looked around. It seemed to be a remote place that he didn't recognize. He should have come here by running underground just now. Just as he was about to fly up to check the direction, a series of rustling sounds came from the side of the mountain rocks in front of him. "I-oh!" Xiaohua was frightened and broke out in a cold sweat. He secretly said, "Why is there someone here?" Then he stood still and didn't dare to move an inch. After the sound, another female voice said in a low voice, "Why are you only here now? I've been waiting for a long time. You also know that this is my Fu clan's forbidden area. Only the patrolling disciples can come here. I just happened to be patrolling today, so I dared to come. But if I stay for too long, I'm afraid there will be problems." Xiaohua was very familiar with this voice. It was Fu Zhu who he saw in the air just now. This beautiful senior sister actually found spring so quickly? Xiaohua was somewhat curious, but he was immediately stunned. "Kiss, kiss, I also don't want to," another equally familiar voice said. "But today is the day I'm assigned to help senior brother." This voice wasn't someone else's, it actually matched. Damn it! This young master has yet to find a dual cultivation partner, and this fellow actually has a foot in two boats. He's eating from the bowl and watching. No, he's not just watching anymore. He's using his hands to scoop up the food from the pot and eat it. Do you still have a conscience? Xiaohua was very indignant, but also extremely helpless. He felt extremely sorry for the two beautiful twin sisters. "I told you long ago, if you're assigned, just do it. How can you waste so much time?" Fu Zhu complained. "Isn't it because Zhu refuses to leave? Little Kiss Kiss, you know that I only have you in my heart. You are my most favorite Zhu." Match seemed to pick up Fu Zhu, and the sound of clothes rustling could be heard. I wanted to tell Fu Zhu long ago, but you just won't let me. Every time I'm with her, my heart is only thinking of you." Match's voice was somewhat mumbling, as if there was something in his mouth. And Fu Zhu's voice was slightly moaning, and she whimpered, "Don't. Shuer is my little sister. Since young, I've always given in to her. This time, let's not tell her first. Later, I'll find a chance to tell her. Don't touch there. I haven't seen you for a few days." Match's voice was somewhat excited. "But I can't do it today." Fu Zhu's voice was a bit loud. "I have to go patrol the mountains. If I'm discovered by others, I'll be in big trouble." Match said, and then there was the sound of clothes rustling again. How is Xiaohua?" Fu Zhu suddenly asked. Xiaohua's heart jumped, and the feeling of blood rushing in his veins quickly faded away. "Xiaohua, he's okay. He's quite honest," Match said casually. "Then, I'll find a chance to talk to Zhuer. You can also talk to Xiaohua? See if he has any intention of becoming an inner court disciple of the Fu family?" "What?" Match was obviously stunned. "What? Don't tell me, you want Zhuer to look for you every day?" Fu Zhu said snappily. "If Zhuer likes Xiaohua, then wouldn't it be logical for you and me?" "Haha, I understand. Don't worry, I'll go back and ask Xiaohua. I reckon that even if he doesn't have any intention of becoming an inner court disciple, he'll be very happy to see Fu Zhu's appearance," Match said with a smile. "However, don't tell Fu Zhu about this first. Wait until I'm almost done asking." "I know, you don't need to tell me. How can I bear to see my sister sad?" Fu Zhu said with a smile. "Right, how's the thing I asked you to look for? Are there still no clues?" Songlun asked. "Sigh, that thing is a secret of the Fu family. How can it be so easy to find? Besides, why are you looking for it now?" Fu Zhu said curiously. "You only need to enter the inner court, and then dual cultivate with me. When your cultivation level is high enough, this thing will naturally be yours." I can't wait to dual cultivate with you," Match said with a smile. "Besides, I want to let the disciples of the Fu family know that Fu Zhu has found such a wise and powerful dual cultivation partner. I want to let you shine in the Fu family and become an eternal legend. And you're so good." Fu Zhu was touched, and seemed to throw herself into his arms. Another wave of whispers sounded, and although Xiaohua didn't know what they were doing, when the whispers entered his ears, it was like a cat's paw scratching his heart, itching unbearably. Damn it! You're already like this with Fu Zhu, what can you become if you stay with Fu Zhu every day? You're still asking me, can I? Xiaohua almost gritted his teeth when he heard this. -5. Chapter 1475. Hearing Fu Zhu's persuasion to give the talisman to him, he gritted his teeth. Where did you guys go earlier? Why did you only think of this young master now? Fu Zhu replied perfunctorily. And I know. Let's go back and ask Xiaohua first. After saying that, the two of them kissed for a while before reluctantly leaving. Xiaohua coldly snorted as he looked at the concealed figure that was gradually disappearing into the distance. He felt both disdain and envy towards this gigolo who had a foot in two boats. After waiting for a while, he followed Fu Zhu's direction and carefully left. Fu Zhu was indeed very familiar with Jinhua Mountain. The path he took was very secretive. From the east of Jinhua Mountain to Skyward Pavilion, he didn't see a single Fu family disciple. Not bad, this young master's harvest today is indeed not bad. Not only did I find the location of the earth fire, but I also found a suitable path. In the future, I will not have to worry about refining pills. Xiaohua happily returned to the pavilion. The pavilion was empty, and there was no trace of Fu Zhu. Xiaohua was too lazy to pay attention to it. He sat cross-legged on the praying mat and began to organize the things he needed for refining pills. And there are already many things in the space. I still need to organize them, otherwise it will become more and more chaotic. Xiaohua immersed his consciousness into the space and said. At this time, there were indeed a lot of things in Xiaohua's space. Large tracts of spiritual grass, a lot of medicinal pills, materials for cultivation and alchemy, yellow talismans, and so on. And there was also the willow branch inserted into the ground, which was called by the mysterious light shadow as the other shore. Next to the willow branch was a fist-sized pearl. Inside the space, there were some dark clouds. From time to time, lightning would shoot out from the clouds, echoing the lightning of the pearl. And because of the pearl, the willow branch was also enveloped in a layer of lightning. Not far away, there was a pool of clear water with a rainbow epiphyllum growing in it. On top of the rainbow epiphyllum, the two eggs of the water-patterned butterfly were gradually growing. Next to the pool, a little further away, was the ice worm king's egg. Although there was no movement, the damaged part of the egg had already grown out, as if it was automatically repairing itself. Next to the egg, there was an extremely cute spirit-seeking mouse curled up in a ball, still sleeping. Only its small tail would stretch out and form circles from time to time. Looking at the spiritual herbs, there was a pile of jade bottles and the statue of Shang Huaming. I must tidy up! As Xiaohua thought, he activated the puppet and began to tidy up the things in the space. The spiritual herbs could not be touched, so this part of the spiritual herbs was specially used for planting. The rainbow epiphyllum and permetha were also planted, which were close to the spiritual herbs, so they were considered another part. The spirit-seeking mouse, the insect eggs, and other living creatures that might come in later were placed in another area. The big seal and crescent-shaped magic tool that he obtained from Ling Jingyi were placed together with the devil's spear tip, devil's spear shaft, and black iron needle, which were considered the magic tool area. The alchemy furnace, jade bottles, various elixirs, and the things that he had just obtained for alchemy were placed together in the alchemy area. A pile of yellow talismans, talisman papers, talisman brushes, and talisman ink used for making talismans were also placed together in the talisman making area. Xiaohua thought for a moment, and also marked out a separate area for the materials used for refining weapons. Although there were not many things at this time, there might be more in the future. All kinds of cultivation methods, travel books, insect scriptures, silk, secret books, and so on, needless to say, were also placed in a separate area for Xiaohua's cultivation. As for the gold foil, tokens, and other miscellaneous things that he did not know the use of, they were also placed together. Shang Huaming's statue, the peacock illusion, and more than 10 top-grade Wu Yao pills were placed together by Xiaohua very seriously. In addition, those spirit stones were all placed together according to their quality. The fire essence and flame crystals were also wrapped in special yellow talismans, and placed separately in several jade bottles, placed together with the spirit stones. Heh, this young master's things are really abundant now. Xiao Hua controlled the puppet to clean up all these things, feeling extremely satisfied. Just by relying on these medicinal pills and cultivation techniques, this young master should be able to cultivate to the foundation building realm. Right at this moment, Song Ying's voice was heard. Xiao Hua, you've returned? Who's the senior martial brother that assigned you? Xiao Hua pulled his consciousness out of the space, looked at Song Ying, who came in with a face full of smiles, and said with a slight nod, He assigned a senior martial brother called Fu Min. He has a dog-like appearance, and before he even taught me anything, he first scolded me to my face, then casually sent me out to teach a female cultivator called Xianlan alone. I didn't expect this Fu Min to also be an extremely interesting person, Song Ying said while stroking his chin. Even if he's interesting, so what? It's not like he's going to teach this little brother talisman crafting techniques. Compared to senior martial brother I'm still far inferior, Xiao Hua said with a smile. And, junior martial brother Xiao, you should cultivate slowly. As long as you're worthy of this elder brother will absolutely not treat you unfairly. Song Ying patted Xiao Hua's shoulder, then walked upstairs without consulting anyone. Why, didn't he mention the matter of the talisman puppet? Xiao Hua was slightly disappointed. He still wanted to sternly refuse in front of Song Ying. Who would have thought that the other party wouldn't even mention it? Forget it, why should I get involved? Xiao Hua curled his lips and sat down cross-legged again. He began to think about what kind of medicinal pill he should refine tomorrow. In his space, there were several pill recipes at this time: the incomplete yellow marrow pill, the cleansing marrow pill, the clear ripple pill, and so on. There were also many spirit herbs needed to refine these pills in his space, so he could casually refine any one of them. However, Xiao Hua's spirit herbs were all over 1,000 years old. Although there were many, he couldn't bear to waste them. After thinking for a long time, Xiao Hua decided to refine the Parasol Celestial Pill. Firstly, the spirit herbs needed to refine this pill were common. Secondly, Xiao Hua had seen the entire process of Xiao Yuhong refining the Parasol Celestial Pill. He also clearly remembered the yellow talisman usage and his own hand seals, so the chances of success were relatively high. Xiao Hua first prepared all the things needed to refine the Parasol Celestial Pill, then took out the alchemy cultivation method and carefully studied it. The next morning, Xiao Hua woke up from his meditation. He wasn't in a hurry to go to the earth fire to refine pills. Instead, he first went to the talisman crafting room and refined the fireball talismans that he wanted to refine today. Only then did he leave the room. When Xiao Hua returned to the small building, he had already left. Maybe he went to Elder Fufeng's place, or maybe he went to other places. This was not what Xiao Hua wanted to know. When Xiao Hua quietly came to the alchemy room on the east side of Jihua Mountain, everything was no different from yesterday. No one had come in at all. Xiao Hua was secretly happy. He first placed the three-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace on the earth fire. Then he used the technique to raise the earth fire and began to warm the furnace. Xiao Hua got up again and walked around the alchemy room, frowning. This alchemy wasn't something that could be done in a day or two. The three-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace had to be placed on the earth fire, and during this period, Xiao Hua couldn't stay here all the time. It didn't matter if the Parasol Celestial Pill was successfully refined, but the safety of the furnace must be guaranteed. He couldn't lose the furnace for alchemy. And that's right, don't I have the talisman? Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and thought of the warning talisman in his space. Although this thing couldn't prevent others from entering the alchemy room, it could at least notify Xiao Hua. With Xiao Hua's flying technique, he should be able to rush here in a short time. Thinking about it, Xiao Hua took out the warning talisman and placed it all around the alchemy room. When Xiao Hua was done, the alchemy furnace was almost ready to be warmed up. Xiaohua returned to the high platform and sat cross-legged in front of the alchemy furnace that was much taller than him. He first closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Then, he opened his eyes and pointed his finger. With a wave of his hand, an oval-shaped opening on the alchemy furnace rotated and opened. Xiaohua followed the steps recorded in the three-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace and the ordinary alchemy method. He threw the parasol grass and blood-devouring grass into the furnace one by one. Then, he recalled how Xiaoyuehong controlled the furnace and waved his hand. A pill-tempering talisman was shot out, and the yellow talisman entered the alchemy furnace. The spirit grass that was gradually melting into a medicinal liquid trembled and turned into a medicinal liquid. Then, a wisp of smoke floated out from the medicinal liquid. It was the impurities in the spirit grass. Hee, the beginning is very smooth. Xiaohua's eyes were unable to see everything inside the alchemy furnace, so he unconsciously released his perception. As expected, although he couldn't see everything inside the alchemy furnace clearly with his divine sense, he could still feel the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. At this moment, the medicinal liquid that was boiling like a small bubble suddenly exploded and splashed all around the pill furnace. This is bad! Xiaohua's heart jumped, and he hurriedly took out the pill-controlling talisman. However, before he could use his magic power, the medicinal liquid had already splashed onto the inner walls of the alchemy furnace. When he saw this, Xiaohua knew that his first attempt at refining a medicinal pill could be considered to have ended in failure. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua found a trace of something wrong. That was, he shouldn't have used the pill-tempering talisman. That day, Xiaoyuehong used the guiding flame talisman and the fire control talisman to control the earth fire. The temperature and intensity of the earth fire were not easy to control. That was why he used the pill-tempering talisman to temper it, and remove the impurities in the medicinal liquid. On the other hand, Xiaohua used a spell to directly control the earth fire. The size of the earth fire was easy to control, so there was no need to use the pill-tempering talisman to temper the impurities. Thinking of this, Xiaohua secretly frowned. The number of spells he could recall and used now was not small. It seemed that many of them could replace the yellow talismans, but Xiaohua himself wasn't clear on which ones could be replaced and which ones couldn't be replaced. Forget it, I'll just treat it as the price. Xiaohua thought and threw the parasol grass and blood-devouring grass into the alchemy furnace again, starting the second refinement. This time, Xiaohua was not in a hurry to use the pill-tempering talisman. He only carefully used the spell to control the size of the earth fire according to the feeling in his perception. That day, there were many yellow talismans used to refine the parasol pill, such as the pill-guiding talisman, pill-control talisman, pill-condensing talisman, pill-pulling talisman, pill-receiving talisman, and many other yellow talismans. The usage of these yellow talismans was clearly recorded in the alchemy manual. Xiaohua only needed to follow the steps and insert them into the alchemy furnace. -5. Chapter 1476. However, this was where the problem lay. Although the alchemy technique clearly stated when various kinds of yellow talismans should be inserted, the specific number of yellow talismans and how much spiritual power should be used was not clearly stated. And it was impossible to explain this clearly because no one knew the specific situation of the alchemy. This could only be judged by experience, and this experience could only be passed down by the masters of the alchemy sect. Without the teachings of these masters, it would be extremely difficult to grasp the alchemy technique by fumbling around. Even the Fu family, a cultivation family that made talismans, could not easily grasp it, let alone Xiaohua. However, Xiaohua had his own unique means. He tried to insert the yellow talismans while using his perception to observe the changes in the pill liquid. Generally, he was silently thinking about the previously recalled techniques in his heart. He also casually used these techniques to observe the differences and effects between the techniques and the yellow talismans. In the process of thinking, some new techniques were slowly recalled by Xiaohua. In the end, Xiaohua simply did not use any yellow talismans. He simply used the techniques in his hands. When he really could not remember any techniques, he would insert the corresponding yellow talisman into the pill furnace according to the alchemy technique. Slowly fumbling around like this, he did not know how many times he failed. Time also slowly passed. When the pill liquid in the pill furnace gradually solidified and the Wu Tsang pill reached the Ning pill, Xiao Hua was relieved. Thinking that he had already stayed in this abandoned pill room for about 4 days, Xiao Hua did not dare to stay any longer. He had already recalled the technique into the pill furnace, and Xiao Hua left the pill room. Sure enough, when he returned to the small building, he saw Tsong Ying and the Fu puppet coming down from upstairs. "Hey, Xiao Hua! You've finally appeared! Where did you go these days?" Tsong Ying asked as soon as they met. "AI, don't mention it. Did you just become a disciple? As soon as we met, he was very concerned about me and gave me pointers. He even said that I don't have any solid foundation, and insisted that I should practice the basic talisman crafting techniques until I'm familiar with them before he would let me come back." Xiao Hua had already thought this through, and replied with a dejected face. "What is this?" The Fu puppet disdainfully said. "When I was practicing the talisman technique, I was locked in the quiet room for more than 10 days. Whoever could not practice the technique could not come out." Xiao Hua was secretly delighted and quickly said in surprise, "So long? What do you think? As cultivators of our generation, we must be able to endure loneliness. What is 10 days to us? When you reach the 5th layer of the aura refining realm, you'll understand. Often, one closed-door cultivation can last as long as 100 days. Cultivation knows no time," Fu Ai lectured. "The reason why my Fu clan was able to establish a foothold in the cultivation world of the country of Xi is because of hard work and bitter cultivation. Xiao Hua, you still have a long way to go. Suffering more hardships will only bring you benefits and no harm." "Yes, I understand." Xiao Hua bowed and smiled. "You sure are free," he then said. "I was the one who refined the fireball talismans for you these past few days. Since you're back, you should quickly refine these fireball talismans and return them to me. Let me relax for a few days. Thank you for looking after me, Senior Marshal Brother He. I'll refine it right away." "Alright, I'm just joking with you." As he spoke, he walked outside and said, "You just have to help your senior brother Bidwell. Your fireball talisman was also casually refined by your senior brother." Xiao Hua watched as Fu Ai and Fu Ai left. A thought-provoking smile gradually appeared on his face. Soon after, Xiao Hua arrived at Fu Min's stone room. Before he even entered, he heard Xuanlun's voice. "Senior Marshal Brother Fu is truly wise. I never thought that the wood life talisman could be refined like this. It's clear that Senior Marshal Brother Fu's talisman crafting technique has reached an extremely high level." "Ha!" Fu Min's voice also sounded, with a hint of pride. "This Senior Marshal Brother only revealed a little. In the future you can slowly learn. Eventually, you'll know that encountering this Senior Marshal Brother is the greatest opportunity in your life." "That's right. I'm already feeling lucky." Xianlong smiled tenderly. "The more I practice with Senior Marshal Brother Fu, the more I feel that Senior Marshal Brother Fu's knowledge is as vast as the sea, profound and unfathomable. It's just SOSO. Oh right, Senior Marshal Brother Fu, I have a question that's inappropriate. If Senior Marshal Brother Fu feels that it's inappropriate, then just pretend that I didn't say anything. And go ahead. That Senior Marshal Brother Fu is so talented. Have you never thought of starting a new sect?" "Sure." Senior Marshal Brother Fu was greatly alarmed, and hurriedly flew out of the stone room. Xiao Hua was also shocked. With a quick flick of his hand, an earth escape talisman was placed on his body, and he fled into the stone wall beside him. However, that stone wall seemed to have a restriction. As soon as Xiao Hua entered, he immediately felt a force coming from all directions, trying to push Xiao Hua out. This is bad. If I'd known earlier, I wouldn't have used the earth escape talisman. I would have just flown a bit further away, and then turned around. Anyone would have thought that I just came here. If I go out now, Wouldn't people think that I've been hiding in there for a long time? Xiaohua was greatly regretful. He impatiently wanted to take out another Earth Escape talisman, but just as his fingers moved slightly, a light suddenly flashed in his mind. His fingers very smoothly formed a spell seal. This spell seal was the Earth Escape technique that he had been bitterly thinking about for the past several dozen days. Ever since Xiaohua used the combination of the Fire Escape technique and the Earth Escape technique in the underground magma of the Flame Forest Swamp, he'd been thinking about it. He was somewhat unclear whether this seal was an Earth Escape technique or not. After all, he'd only heard of the 5 Elements Escape technique. Moreover, he'd never heard of this 5 Elements Escape technique being used in hot magma. In addition, he'd just used the combination of 2 escape techniques. He really couldn't understand it. Today, in a hurry, he suddenly formed the seal that had been tangled in his mind for a long time without thinking. It was actually a pure Earth Escape technique. It was completely different from the combination of the 2 escape techniques from before. As soon as the Earth Escape technique was used, the force around Xiaohua's body suddenly decreased, and he was able to temporarily stay in the stone wall. However, not long after, the force suddenly increased, and Xiaohua's Earth Escape technique was useless. He was still forcefully pushed out. Fortunately, when Xiaohua came out of the stone wall, Fu Min had already entered the stone room. He heard a faint voice from inside. The Fu clan is this elder brother's origin. Moreover, compared to the dangerous cultivation world, my Fu clan can be considered a paradise. This elder brother doesn't have any other thoughts. I'll just peacefully cultivate, sure. Someone's coming! Seeing that Xianlan still had something to say, Fu Min hurriedly said. Soon after, outside the stone room, Xiaohua, whose face was filled with joy, exerted some force on his feet and quickly walked in. Seeing that it was Xiaohua, Fu Min sneered. Xiaohua, it's only been 4 days, and you've already become proficient in that fireball talisman? En? Xiaohua was stunned. He didn't expect Fu Min to ask this. Perhaps I haven't become proficient in it. However, in the next few days, I still want to listen to Senior Brother Fu's guidance. Xiaohua stuttered a little. What guidance is there to give? If you can't practice your basic skills well, even if this elder brother imparts the confinement talisman to you, you still won't be able to successfully refine it, Fu Min said disdainfully. That's true. Xiaohua rubbed his nose and nodded. Since that's the case, I'd better go back and familiarize myself with the fireball talisman. And talisman crafting is about mastery and specialization. If you can refine the fireball talisman to high grade, you'll have a place in the Fu clan. Fu Min nodded. If you can refine the fireball talisman to the highest grade, you'll be like this elder brother, helping out a senior brother. You'll also have some status in the Fu clan. Senior brother Fu's teachings are right. Xiaohua laughed in his heart. The fireball talisman is your specialty. Even if you learn other talisman crafting techniques, it's just a reference. Don't be distracted by it. Fu Min had a profound expression. However, since you've come today, this elder brother won't let you down too much. I'll teach you some of the Wood Life Talisman's techniques first. It'll be of some help to your mastery of the fireball talisman. Thank you, Senior Brother Fu. Xiaohua cupped his hands and said. After that, Fu Min once again demonstrated the Wood Life Talisman's techniques in front of Xiaohua. Of course, he only demonstrated the most basic techniques and didn't refine the real Wood Life Talisman. However, after Fu Min finished demonstrating the techniques, Xiaohua's face revealed a trace of strangeness. Why? Xiaohua already knew how to refine the Wood Life Talisman. Moreover, under the 5-star alignment technique, he used a top-grade fireball talisman to upgrade it to a high-grade one. However, the techniques that Fu Min taught him were basically the same as the ones he used. Only a few key points were different. Although the differences were very minute, but with Xiaohua's experience in talisman crafting, using this technique, the Wood Life Talisman would definitely fail. Xiaohua, have you memorized it? Fu Min asked. This one somewhat. Xiaohua hesitated for a moment, feeling a little strange in his heart. Without waiting for him to finish, Fu Min waved his hand and said, "And since you've memorized it, then go back and practice first. Once you've memorized it, then come see me again. Remember, you must practice the technique you just used. If you slack off even a little bit, you won't be able to refine the Wood Life Talisman." At this moment, Xiaohua's heart was clear. He finally understood what this so-called number one person in the Fu family, Fu Min, who was magnanimous in his conduct, was thinking. He cupped his hands and said, "Many thanks for Senior Brother Fu's guidance. Senior Brother Fu spent a lot of effort to teach me. If this one still doesn't work hard, then it's this one's fault. And you can go." Fu Min nodded his head in satisfaction. Xiaohua's mouth hung a trace of a cold smile. He turned around and walked out of the stone room. Seeing that there was no one around, he went back to the path he took last time and prepared to go to the alchemy room. But just as he walked a pipe of smoke and was about to turn to the east side of Mount Jinhua, a voice suddenly rang out from the stone wall above his head. "Xiaohua, where are you going?" "Ah?" Xiaohua was shocked. He had been paying attention to the sky all this time, but he didn't expect that there would be someone on the stone wall above his head. Moreover, that person even called out his name. When he raised his head, he discovered that a Fu family disciple was standing high up, holding a yellow talisman in his hand, looking at him with a puzzled expression. -5. Chapter 1477. "Oh, it's Senior Fu!" When Xiaohua saw the Fu clan disciple, his face immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He cupped his hands and said, "I was worried. This road, does it lead to the Skyward Pavilion?" The Fu clan disciple was none other than the Fu puppet. "Skyward Pavilion?" The Fu puppet was obviously stunned and asked curiously, "You have been in my Jinhua mountain for dozens of days and you don't know which road leads to the Skyward Pavilion? Senior sister should know. Just now, I followed Senior Brother Fu Min out to practice talisman crafting. But just as we were halfway there, Senior Brother Fu received a message from his teacher and immediately left, leaving me to go back alone. Senior sister should know. I've always been a directionally challenged person. As I walked, I lost my way," Xiaohua said helplessly. "TSK, how would I know that you are directionally challenged?" The Fu puppet sneered. "Don't you know how to fly? You can find the Skyward Pavilion with your eyes." "How would I dare?" Xiaohua argued. "I know that there are many places in Jinhua Mountain that don't allow flying. I finally got the chance to become a talisman crafting talisman, and I don't dare to make a mistake, so I can only look for it myself. Sigh, if only he was as honest as you," the Fu puppet said with hidden bitterness. "Who? Fu Mountain?" Xiaohua said in his heart. "That guy doesn't seem like a daring person. Xiaohua, the Skyward Pavilion is over there. You can fly there. This is my Fu clan's forbidden area. Only mountain patrollers can come here. If anyone else enters, they will be expelled from the Fu clan or lose their lives. Luckily you met me. If it was someone else, the consequences would be very serious," the Fu puppet said in a low voice. "Yes, thank you, Senior Fu." Xiaohua cupped his hands and was about to fly towards the Skyward Pavilion when he heard the Fu puppet call out from behind. "Oh right, Xiaohua, that." Xiaohua was stunned. He stopped and asked, "Is something the matter, Senior Fu? And that Fu puppet goes to the Skyward Pavilion every day?" The Fu puppet's face was slightly pale as she asked softly. Xiaohua's eyes turned. He thought to himself, "Could it be this Shiji still hasn't given up on her evil intentions?" Thus he had no choice but to tell the truth. "And I want to let Shiji know that the talisman goes there every day and is very close to He-Fu." Xiaohua's words were a bit harsh, and he wanted the Fu puppet to give up on the idea. However, the Fu puppet's face paled, and a vicious gleam appeared in her eyes. "Then they—" But just as she spoke a little, a faint blush appeared on her forehead. She bit her lips and said, "Forget it, you can go." "Then I'll take my leave." Xiaohua didn't understand what the Fu puppet was thinking. He cupped his hands and flew away, thinking to himself, "It's your good fortune that Song Qing didn't pay attention to you. Song Qing has a foot in both boats. If you continue to pester her, the one who will be hurt in the end will definitely be you." Seeing Xiaohua slowly fly away, the Fu puppet sighed for no reason. Her eyes were filled with hidden bitterness, and her figure also flew up. It was the Fu clan's forbidden area in the Jinhua Mountain East. Xiaohua returned to the skyward pavilion and carefully thought about it. He couldn't help but secretly rejoice. He didn't know why this Fu Min was ignoring him. Moreover, she had even passed him the wrong wood life talisman, allowing him to practice it alone. Coincidentally, she had also sunk into a land of warmth. She didn't care about his whereabouts. With his current status, if he wanted to practice other yellow talismans, he probably wouldn't have the chance. He would have to wait a few years before he could see any middle or high-grade yellow talismans. During this time, wouldn't he be able to refine pills? Even if he didn't have the chance to obtain any Qingyun talismans in the future, being able to practice alchemy in the Fu clan was also a great harvest. Thinking about this, Xiaohua didn't delay. He hurriedly picked up the talisman brush, and hurriedly refined all the fireball talismans he owed from the previous 4 days. Then, seeing that it was still early, he refined many more fireball talismans. To be honest, using a talisman brush to refine a middle-grade fireball talisman was easier for Xiaohua than drinking cold water. He originally had the flesh and blood of a phoenix, and had a natural affinity for fire. Refining a fire attribute yellow talisman was absolutely easy for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to refine a top-grade yellow talisman on the first try. Using a talisman brush to refine a fireball talisman allowed him to control his transcendence energy more skillfully, but it didn't help him in the art of talisman crafting. By the time Xiaohua stopped, the sky had already turned dark. Xiaohua placed the yellow talisman in the quiet room and returned to the small building. The talisman wasn't in the building. Just like before, Xiaohua entered the room and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and began to cultivate. Xiaohua didn't know when the talisman would return. He only immersed his mind into the space and comprehended the heavenly Tao. The true energy of raising fire to burn the heavens in his body flowed through his meridians, drawing energy into his body and refining it. At the same time, the dragon transformation art continued to advance step by step. Because he was cultivating in the Fu clan, Xiaohua had some misgivings in his heart. Therefore, he didn't take the top-grade fire attribute spirit stone with him. Xiaohua's mind seemed to have just entered the towering realm, and also seemed to have stayed in the towering realm for a long time. The next day, when the first ray of sunlight shone into the room, Xiaohua opened his eyes. At this time, his eyes didn't have any expression. The 2 balls of flames in his eyes gradually extinguished. Then, his eyes slightly dimmed, and then became clear again. Following that, traces of emotion slowly emerged from his eyes. "Another day!" Xiaohua opened his mouth, and a bit of sun essence abruptly appeared, and was swallowed by him in one gulp. He didn't know how he learned this method of absorbing sun essence, but every morning, he would naturally take a bite. Going out again? Just as Xiaohua was about to go out, he heard the voice of the Fu clan from upstairs. "Reporting to Senior Brother He, Senior Brother Fu's requirements are very strict. I'm afraid I won't be able to come back in the next few days. Yesterday, I had already bitterly cultivated in the quiet room for a long time and refined a lot of fireball talismans. If there is anything lacking, I ask Senior Brother He to forgive me," Xiaohua said with a smile. "Haha, I already said yesterday that I was just teasing you. You really took it seriously." The Fu clan laughed and said, "You can go now. This is a very good opportunity to ask the direct descendants of the Fu clan for guidance. You don't have to worry about the offerings here." "Thank you, Senior Brother He." Xiaohua's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Whether it was in Jinghua City or Jinhua Mountain, this Fu clan left a good impression on Xiaohua. If he didn't have a foot in 2 boats, it would be even better. And that's right. If he could introduce the talisman to Xiaohua earlier, that would be the best. Xiaohua walked along the path that led to the Fu clan's forbidden area. He carefully paid attention to his surroundings, and even released his perception. Sure enough, he didn't find anything wrong and calmly arrived at the alchemy room. The inside of the alchemy room was still the same as before. The warning talisman also didn't show any signs of activity. However, there was a problem with the parasol pill inside the alchemy furnace. It had already turned into ashes at an unknown time. Xiaohua wasn't surprised. He hadn't been in front of the alchemy furnace for nearly a day and a night. It would be strange if the alchemy furnace could be successfully condensed. Xiaohua struck out a spell to lower the temperature of the earth fire. From the space, he took out some parasol grass and blood-devouring grass and placed them into the alchemy furnace. He secretly said, "Damn it, this alchemy technique still consumes a lot of spiritual herbs. Fortunately, this young master has many conveniences in this space. Otherwise, it's really impossible to learn this alchemy technique. The Fu clan, they don't have any foundation and they don't have a place to grow spiritual herbs. Yet they want to pass down the alchemy technique. Those disciples probably don't have the talent of this young master. Even if the Fu clan can refine the yellow talismans for alchemy, what about the spiritual herbs? The Fu clan would probably have to spend a huge amount of spiritual stones to buy them from each city. Furthermore, the spiritual herbs are rare. How can they afford it? And I was too optimistic. The Fu clan might not be able to refine the yellow talismans for alchemy. This young master understands now. Xiaohua suddenly realized. This Fu Yunbua is indeed powerful. What does the Fu clan do? Isn't it just refining yellow talismans? They only need to comprehend the alchemy technique that this young master has and refine it into yellow talismans. Then, won't they have a lot of spiritual stones? Why would they need to refine alchemy? It's just that. I don't know if the alchemy technique that the Fu clan obtained is similar to this young master's. And if there is, they will keep this technique and give the rest to the Liao clan of Gung Mountain. The Liao clan wants to buy both the yellow talismans for alchemy and spiritual herbs. It would be strange if they didn't destroy their clan. Xiaohua let his thoughts run wild, but he was able to guess the course of events pretty much. In the following 10 days, Xiaohua became bolder. During the day, he would refine alchemy and try to recall all the alchemy techniques. At night, he would cultivate and look after the alchemy furnace. Under his tireless refining, he actually managed to refine the Wu Tsung pill to the final stage of pill extraction. Of course, the pill extraction technique was more complicated. Although Xiaohua had already recalled it, he was still a little unfamiliar with it. In the end, he didn't succeed in extracting the Wu Tsung pill. Alright, just one last step. This young master isn't in a hurry. I haven't returned for 10 days. I don't know if there are any abnormalities. Xiaohua extinguished the earth fire and put away the 3-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace into the space. He also put away the warning talisman and returned to the skyward pavilion. There was no trace of a match in the small building, nor in the quiet room. Xiaohua thought for a moment and went to Ming Sui's residence, which was closest to them. Coincidentally, Yi Shiguang was also here. He was chatting with Ming Sui about something. When they saw Xiaohua come over, they enthusiastically stood up and greeted him. After the three of them greeted each other, Xiaohua smiled and said, "Long time no see. I wonder how the two of you have progressed?" When Xiaohua was avoiding the talisman puppets, talisman jades, and talisman puppets, he didn't look for the two of them. The two of them saw that Xiaohua was easygoing and gave them a lot of pointers on cultivation and talisman crafting. They were also familiar with each other, so Xiaohua's direct question wasn't too presumptuous. When the two of them heard Xiaohua's question, they were overjoyed. Ming Sui said, "This Fu clan really lives up to its reputation. I received pointers from senior brother Gang Dai. The fireball talisman is about to enter the high-grade realm. Haha, congratulations, congratulations," Xiaohua said with a smile. "This is nothing. Fellow Taoist Ye's icicle talisman is already a high-grade talisman." Ming Sui waved his hand and said, "I wonder how fellow Taoist Zhao's fireball talisman is? -5. Chapter 1478. Am I? Xiaohua rubbed his nose and smiled bitterly. I'm not as lucky as you two. My talisman crafting technique is still in place. Haha, it's fine. Ming Sui smiled. As long as fellow Taoist Xiao works hard and has seen your brother He's guidance, you'll definitely break through in time. Don't you think so, fellow Taoist Yi? Seeing the strange smile on Xiaohua's face, Yi Shiguang echoed. Yes, fellow Taoist Xiao can't be discouraged. Yes, thank you for your encouragement. Xiaohua smiled. By the way, I haven't returned for a few days, I wonder, eh? We were just discussing the matter of asking for leave from the Fu clan in a few days. Could it be that fellow Taoist Xiao has already left? Ming Sui was a little surprised. It's not yet time to ask for leave, right? He, fellow Taoist Xiao is with fellow Taoist He, and fellow Taoist He is favored by Elder Fu Feng. It shouldn't be difficult to ask for leave in advance, right? Fellow Taoists, what are you saying? I's head is full of confusion. Xiaohua asked very strangely. This humble Taoist has only been helping senior martial brother craft talismans these past few days and hasn't returned to the Skyward Pavilion. I just want to ask about senior martial brother He's whereabouts. Where did this leave come from? What's with this leave? Oh, so that's how it is. Yi Shiguang smiled. We misunderstood. Ming Sui also said apologetically. I was a little reckless. That fellow Taoist He is personally taught by Elder Fu, and his senior sisters are Fu Ho and Fu Zhu. They are the direct bloodline of the Fu clan's inner court. How could we know his whereabouts? Fellow Taoist Xiao, your senior sister Fu didn't help you find a disciple for dual cultivation? Hearing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but think of Fairy Hong Xia. He thought of her peerlessly beautiful face and her seemingly expressive eyes. However, Xiaohua immediately shook his head. Fairy Hong Xia was a 10th layer Qi refining cultivator, and he was only a 4th layer Qi refining cultivator. The difference between their cultivations was not ordinary. Furthermore, based on what the Kai family had said, as well as what Kai Shuixia had said, Fairy Hong Xia's requirements seemed to be extraordinarily high. He was afraid that he would not be able to catch her eye. Furthermore, looking at the relationship between Kai Shuixia and Li Zongbao, Fairy Hong Xia must have placed her fate together with the fate of the Kai family. With such an extravagant hope, she was afraid that she would fall into the same dead end as Kai Shuixia. By the way, last night, I saw senior martial brother He hurriedly leaving. Yi Shiguang didn't notice Xiaohua's absent-mindedness. As he spoke, he pointed his finger in the direction Xiaohua was walking. Xiaohua rolled his eyes and nodded. Thank you so much. Then he asked, What's the matter with the leave application? Please enlighten me. Didn't senior martial brother mention fellow Taoist help? Minghua asked curiously. Or have you forgotten? Xiaohua smiled. Oh, it's nothing, Yi Shiguang said. We are talisman masters in the Fu family. Generally, we have half a year and 10 days of free time for ourselves. 2 months after we entered Jinhua Mountain, we applied for leave for the first time. The duration is slightly longer, about 10 days. Just now, I was discussing with fellow Taoist Ming. In these 2 months, we have also refined some yellow talismans and obtained some spirit stones. We will see if we can apply for leave to find a market or exchange market to exchange for some pills that we need. Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart moved. He pinched his fingers and calculated. It was almost time for the appointment with Shui Qingyuan at Xiyunyan School. If he could apply for leave to go to Xiyunyan School and obtain the embryonic breathing pill, then give the fire essence flame crystal to Shui Qingyuan, wouldn't he be able to obtain the surprise that Shui Qingyuan mentioned? However, to go to Xiyunyan School, he had to go to Yenyuan City. Moreover, it had only been 2 months since he left Linyu Town. If he went again, he was afraid that he would attract attention. If he could not go, it would be best if he did not go. He was afraid that he would not be able to give the embryonic breathing pill to Fairy Hong Xia. Fellow Taoist Yi, how do we apply for leave? Xiaohua asked. You only need to explain it to senior brother Gang Lai, then go to Skyward Pavilion to register, Yi Shiguang said. What? Fellow Taoist Xiao also wants to go. Why don't you go with me? How could Xiao Hua go with him? He smiled and said, If we apply for leave together, that's fine. After we go out, I still have my own matters to attend to. I'm afraid we can't go together. No matter. We want to apply for leave tomorrow. I wonder if fellow Taoist Xiao wants to go with us? Ming Sui smiled. Of course, we can go together tomorrow. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, I still have to go and explain to senior brother Gang Lai. Fellow Taoists, please. Ming Sui and Yi Shiguang stood up to send Xiao Hua out. When Xiao Hua arrived at Fu Min's stone room, just like before, Xianlan asked Fu Min for advice with a look of longing, and Fu Min had already started to teach Xianlan sharp gold talismans. Regarding Xiao Hua's application for leave, as Xiao Hua expected, Fu Min didn't hesitate in the slightest and agreed. As for Xiao Hua's request for leave for a few more days, she also casually agreed. She didn't even ask where Xiao Hua went, or how the refining of the fireball talisman, or wood life talisman was going. Seeing this, Xiao Hua didn't feel like being long-winded. After bowing, he returned to Skyward Pavilion. At this time, Gang Lai also returned. His face was full of exhaustion, and it was unknown what he was doing. Seeing Xiao Hua, Gang Lai just smiled and said, You haven't returned for more than 10 days. I'm afraid your talisman refining technique has improved greatly, right? Alas, not at all. Little brother's aptitude is not good enough. The fireball talisman has made some progress, but compared to senior brother it's far too lacking. Xiao Hua said modestly. You haven't returned for a few days, but elder brother has learned a fire dragon talisman. Today, my body is very tired. Wait for tomorrow, elder brother will refine it and let you see the world. Gang Lai said with a smile. Good boy, a fire dragon talisman. Xiao Hua was secretly shocked. That's a high-grade fire attribute yellow talisman. The requirements for transcendence energy and talisman refining technique are extremely high. It's definitely a secret inheritance of the Fu clan. Gang Lai hasn't even entered the inner court, but he's already learned it. The fire dragon talisman that Fu Zhu was talking about that day, right? Congratulations, senior brother Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, Little brother also wanted to broaden his horizons, but tomorrow, little brother will be going to Skyward Pavilion with Yi Shiguang and the others to apply for leave. I'm afraid little brother will have to wait for little brother to come back and see senior brother divine ability. Apply for leave? Gang Lai asked with a surprised expression. Don't talisman masters of the Fu clan only apply for leave once every half a year? Then, with an embarrassed expression, he explained. Elder brother. I also heard it from others. Little brother also didn't know. Just now, I heard Ming Sui and the others say that the first time you apply for leave is 2 months. Xiao Hua said with a smile. If senior brother wants to go out, why don't we go together tomorrow? Of course, elder brother also has some matters to attend to. Let's go together to Skyward Pavilion tomorrow, Gang Lai said with a strange expression. The night passed without any words. On the morning of the second day, Xiao Hua, Gang Lai, Ming Sui, and Yi Shiguang went to Skyward Pavilion to register for leave. Unexpectedly, because it was the first time they applied for leave, many talisman masters had already registered early. In order to control the number of people going out, Skyward Pavilion had already stopped registering yesterday. Xiao Hua and the others came late. Junior brother Xiao. You should wait until 4 months later, Fu Shan said with a gloating smile. Alas, that's the only way. Xiao Hua felt somewhat regretful in his heart. Although 4 months later was a bit late, the embryonic breathing pill might not be a problem. However, the fire essence flame crystal would probably be late. Those cultivation aristocratic families would definitely send the items to Xunyan's school during this period of time. Forget it, if I get it, it's my fortune. If I don't, it's my fate, Xiao Hua said inwardly. How about this? Junior brother Xiao, fellow Taoist Ming, please wait a moment. Elder brother will go and ask Elder Fu, Gang Lai said with a smile, seeming to also want to go out. That's great. Ming Sui and Yi Shiguang were overjoyed. However, Xiao Hua said, there's no need to be too forceful. If you can go, then go. Fu Shan watched coldly from the side. When Gang Lai walked far away, he sneered and said, this guy is really arrogant. Does he think that Skyward Pavilion belongs to his family? Even if he found a direct descendant of the Fu clan's inner court to be his dual cultivation partner, he still can't disregard Skyward Pavilion's rules like this. Xiao Hua also coldly glanced at Fu Shan a few times. He didn't say anything and just stood quietly to the side. Ming Sui and Yi Shiguang looked at the two of them. For some reason, they didn't dare to casually speak. The scene was quite awkward. Fortunately, Gang Lai came back not long later with a smile on his face. How was it, fellow Taoist? Fellow Taoist he? Ming Sui asked impatiently. Gang Lai nodded slightly and handed a token to Fu Shan. Senior Marshal Brother Fu, please take us to register our leave. This? Fu Shan's expression was a bit strange. He looked at the token unwillingly, then casually took it and left without saying a word. Ha! Xiao Hua laughed in his heart and waved his hand. Yi Shiguang and Ming Sui also secretly covered their mouths and followed Xiao Hua and Gang Lai to register inside. Xiao Hua, Yi Shiguang, and Ming Sui had already agreed yesterday. Naturally, they had also packed their things. As soon as their leave was over, they were ready to leave. Gang Lai hesitated for a moment and whispered to Xiao Hua, Junior Marshal Brother Xiao, I might be a bit late. How about this? When will you come back from which teleportation formation? I'll wait for you there. This? I have some matters to attend to. I'm afraid it will take about 20 days before I can return. If nothing unexpected happens, I'll come back from the teleportation formation in Thotu Town. Xiao Hua hesitated and said, And that's good. I also have some matters to attend to. The time should be just right. Gang Lai smiled and took out a transmission talisman. When Junior Marshal Brother Xiao arrives at Thotu Town, send me the transmission talisman. I'll come back with you. All right. Xiao Hua couldn't think of a reason to decline. He stretched out his hand and accepted the talisman. After Gang Lai left, Ming Sui said enviously, Fellow Taoist Xiao, fellow Taoist, he really treats you well. Not only does he address you differently, but he also cares for you. In the future, fellow Taoist's future in the Fu clan will be limitless. Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat as he thought. I've seen Yunge in Jinghua City and I know his cultivation level. He can't do anything to me in Jinghua Mountain, but what about outside of Jinghua Mountain? He wouldn't have ulterior motives, right? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. -5. Chapter 1479. As the saying goes, one may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. During his time in the Fu clan, he had treated Xiao Hua very well, but who knew what he was thinking? Perhaps he wanted to win Xiao Hua over and make him conceal his true nature. But the problem was, this kind of winning over wasn't reliable. If the Fu clan offered a greater temptation, would Xiao Hua be at ease? Even if Xiao Hua only wanted peace and quiet, the best outcome would be to fish in troubled waters. He had never thought of exposing the Fu clan, but he didn't know who the Fu clan was. Moreover, the Fu clan was aware of the Fu clan's inheritance. If the Fu clan found out, only death awaited. Therefore, the most appropriate thing to do was to get rid of Xiao Hua. After understanding this, Xiao Hua sneered inwardly. When he first met the Fu clan, he was only in the 7th layer of the Qi refining realm. Now that 2 years had passed, the Fu clan was at most in the 8th layer of the Qi refining realm. Ever since Xiao Hua killed Kaiyingxia and other 7th layer cultivators, he had a certain understanding of his own strength. He wasn't afraid of the Fu clan, so he smiled and said to Yi Shiguang, I arrived at Jinghua Mountain at the same time as Senior Marshal Brother He and also met the same Senior Marshal sister. I'm afraid Senior Marshal Brother He loves the house and its crow. In short, it's fate. If fellow Taoist Xiao succeeds in the Fu clan in the future, don't forget about us, Ming Sui said meaningfully. Haha, let's wait until we return to Senior Marshal Brother He. I still want to hug his thigh. Xiao Hua laughed heartily as he flew out of Jinhua Mountain. Ming Sui and Yi Shiguang also laughed as they followed him. It took nearly 10 days to travel from Jinhua Mountain to Jianyu Mountain through the transporting formation. A round trip would take 20 days, not including the time to teleport to other places. The Fu clan's talisman craftsmen definitely didn't have enough time. Therefore, Xiao Hua and the others headed to the transporting formation in Siyue Town, which was only 4 days away from Jinhua Mountain. Xiao Hua had never been to Siyue Town before, but Ming Sui and Yi Shiguang had come from the teleportation array there. Xiao Hua didn't need to worry about it. 4 days passed quickly. On the evening of the 4th day, when the lights were lit, Xiao Hua and the others arrived at the west side of Siyue Town. Before Yi Shiguang could tell Xiao Hua the location of the teleportation array, a figure flew in front of Xiao Hua and the others. There seems to be... Xiao Hua was slightly stunned when he saw the figure, and he raised his voice. Is that fellow Taoist Xianlan? When the figure heard the call, she paused for a moment. Soon after, she stopped in midair and turned around. It was Xianlan, who was practicing talisman crafting with Xiao Hua. Fellow Taoist Xian, why did you also ask for leave? Xiao Huafei cupped his hands and smiled. Why can't I ask for leave? Xianlan glanced at Xiao Hua and said very unhappily. Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and said, Since Senior Brother Fu thinks so highly of you, why don't you practice more in Jinhua Mountain? Isn't it a waste of time to ask for leave? Senior Brother Fu doesn't think highly of you. Xianlan asked. Me? Xiao Hua touched his nose and didn't answer. He pointed his finger and said, This is fellow Taoist Yi Shiguang and fellow Taoist Ming Sui, who are next to my residence. Then, he introduced Xianlan. This is fellow Taoist Xianlan, who is practicing talisman crafting with me. After the three of them greeted each other, Ming Sui smiled and said, I wonder where fellow Taoist Xianlan wants to go. If we stay together, we can take care of each other. Xianlan shook her head and said, I don't have a specific place I want to go. I just feel that after staying in Jinhua Mountain for so long, I want to go out for a walk. If the three of you have something to do, you can do as you please. I don't want to disturb you. And since it's like this, we were too reckless. Yi Shiguang smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Xianlan, please go first. Okay, I will take my leave. Xianlan didn't hold back. She cupped her hands towards the three of them and flew towards the teleportation array. After Xianlan left, Yi Shiguang and Ming Sui glanced at each other and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Xiao, you have to face this kind of fellow Taoist Xianlan every day. It's really hard on you. Of course, when you think about Senior Brother He, it's really like the difference between the clouds and mud. Xiao Hua laughed and said, feeling a bit closer to Yi Shiguang and Ming Sui. After a while, Xiao Hua also said, Fellow Taoist Yi, fellow Taoist Ming, I also have to go to the town of Thought You to take care of some things. Let's part ways here. Ming Sui and Yi Shiguang smiled and said, We know. We'll go first. You can come back later. Xiao Hua smiled and said, Fellow Taoists, please. Ming Sui and Yi Shiguang cupped their hands and said goodbye to Xiao Hua before flying towards the teleportation array. Xiao Hua also walked towards the town of Thought You. After a while, Xiao Hua found a secluded place and wore the camouflage before slowly flying towards the teleportation array. Although it was already night time, there were still many people using the teleportation array. The town of Thought You's teleportation array was much more convenient than the one in Yenyuan City. At the very least, there was no need to make an appointment. Xiao Hua only took out a high-grade spirit stone and said that he was from Shallow Speech City. He was then led into the teleportation array and teleported together with two cultivators who didn't seem to be from the Fu clan. Shallow Speech City's teleportation array seemed to be underground. When Xiao Hua opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was a huge pillar. That pillar was inlaid with more than 10 head-sized moonstones, brightly illuminating the surroundings of the teleportation array. Xiaohua looked at the cultivator sitting on the ground next to him, and calmly walked out of the teleportation array. Next to the teleportation array were a few people who looked like city guards. When they saw Xiaohua's actions, their faces immediately showed respect. "Fellow cultivator, I would like to teleport to Yenyuan City, may I?" Xiaohua walked in front of one of the city guards and cupped his hands. "Senior, please know that you need to make an appointment to go to Yenyuan City. I'm afraid you can't do it today." The city guard quickly bowed in return. "Eh? Why is Yenyuan City still like this? Is it not over yet?" Xiaohua's tone turned cold. "That's not it, Senior. Although the incident at Yenyuan City is not over yet, it is not as tense as it was 2 months ago. Cultivators who use the teleportation array do not need to show their true faces," the city guard quickly explained. "However, because Shallow Speech City is quite far from Yenyuan City, it costs too many spirit stones to teleport each time. Therefore, we have to wait until there are more people going, before we can teleport once." Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "This old man naturally knows this. Check how many people have made an appointment to Yenyuan City." "Senior, please wait a moment. The number of cultivators going to Yenyuan City has indeed decreased recently." The city guard turned and left. After a while, he turned back and said with a smile, "What a coincidence. There are 4 cultivators going to Yenyuan City tomorrow afternoon. Including Senior, there will be 5 cultivators." "All right." Xiaohua clapped his hands and took out a high-grade spirit stone. He said, "Do I need to leave my name?" The city guard quickly waved his hand. "Since Senior has already given me the spirit stone in advance, there is naturally no need to leave your name." The city guard took the spirit stone and handed over a token. He smiled and said, "Your Shallow Speech City is much stronger than Yenyuan City. Senior, thank you for your praise. This is all because of our city Lord Mo's good management." The city guard smiled and said, "Senior only needs to come tomorrow afternoon and give this token to the city guard." "All right." Xiaohua took the token, turned and walked out of the teleportation array. When he reached the surface, it was already late at night. Xiaohua looked left and right. Not far away, there was an inn. Xiaohua asked for the price and found a room to stay in. The night passed uneventfully. Xiaohua only came out of his room when it was close to noon the next day. Although it was Xiaohua's first time in Shallow Speech City, he didn't want to cause trouble and didn't plan to walk around. However, just as he walked out of the inn, he heard a familiar voice behind him ask, "Waiter, how do I get to Yuanming Temple?" "Eh? Enemies really don't meet," Xiaohua thought to himself. That voice wasn't just anyone, it was Xianlan who was walking up and down in a straight line. Xiaohua didn't turn back. He walked to the entrance of the inn and stood still, pretending to look around. "Senior Immortal knows. When you go out, walk straight south. When you see the shop taught by Xuanyan, head west." The waiter was eloquent, and said a lot in one breath. Xiaohua felt dizzy listening to him. Xianlan smiled and said, "Thank you, waiter." That waiter was very flattered and repeatedly said that he didn't dare. Xianlan quickly walked out of the inn, and looked at Xiaohua who was standing at the side. Her face showed a trace of vigilance. She walked a few steps and secretly turned back. Seeing Xiaohua slowly walking in the direction of the teleportation array, she felt relieved. She hurriedly walked according to the waiter's instructions. This Xianlan doesn't have a fixed place, right? Why would she want to go to Yuanming Temple just by walking around? Xiaohua only had a fleeting thought. What Xianlan did had nothing to do with him. Why would he worry about her for no reason? The buildings in Shallow Speech City were different from those in Yenyuan City. They were all built with huge bluestones, and the distance between them was very large. The inn wasn't far from the teleportation array, but the bluestone road between them was more than twice as long as the one in Yenyuan City. Xiaohua looked at the various people on the bluestone road and then looked at the many shops with different styles. He thought to himself, "I wonder if Shallow Speech City is one of the top 10 cities in the country of Xi." When I return from Xuyuan cult and see if I have enough time, I'll take a look around and broaden my horizons. The teleportation array was also built with bluestones, and its shape was very strange. Huge bluestones slanted above the building and pointed in all directions. At first glance, it looked like a hedgehog. Xiaohua walked to the entrance of the teleportation array. The city guard stepped forward to block him and bowed politely. Xiaohua didn't answer and took out the token from yesterday. "Senior, please wait a moment." The city guard also took out a magic tool that looked like a disc and placed the token on it. A layer of faint green flashed, and some words appeared on the token. The city guard looked at it, and kept it in his sleeve. He raised his hand and said, "Senior, please. The 3 seniors heading to Yenyuan City have already arrived. They can be teleported in a moment." "Eh? It's already noon and there are still people not here? Could it be?" Xiaohua frowned slightly. "This is not something this humble one can know." The city guard respectfully led Xiaohua to a guest hall and turned to leave. -5. Chapter 1480. At this time, there were already 3 cultivators in the hall. After Xiaohua walked in and swept his gaze over them, he couldn't help but be stunned on the spot. These 3 cultivators were all late-stage Foundation Establishment seniors. Foundation Establishment cultivators were usually rarely seen, but now, 3 of them had suddenly appeared in front of Xiaohua. Moreover, they were all late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators. Xiaohua suddenly felt an incomparable pressure in his heart. Moreover, none of these 3 late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators were dressed in camouflage. They were all very magnanimously sitting on jade stools with their eyes closed in meditation. Seeing someone come in, the 3 of them slightly opened their eyes and glanced at him. Seeing that it was a person in camouflage, they slightly released their divine senses. However, just as they swept over Xiaohua's body, their divine senses touched each other, and they immediately withdrew them. With just a sweep of their divine senses, Xiaohua's forehead was covered in sweat. At this time, Xiaohua's cultivation had already reached the mid-4th stage of the aura refining realm, but his actual magic power was close to the 8th or 9th stage of the aura refining realm. These late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators' divine senses naturally couldn't see through his camouflage. However, the camouflage couldn't withstand the might of a Foundation Establishment cultivator. Not to mention 3 late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators. Even if it was just one, Xiaohua's limbs would immediately go soft. Fortunately, these 3 Foundation Establishment cultivators seemed to be afraid of each other. None of them rashly released their might. "Alas, my cultivation is poor. It's really unbearable." Xiaohua somewhat trembled as he walked to a jade stool far away from the 3 people. He only put half of his butt on it, and also closed his eyes to rest. He actually wanted to calm his mind, but the 3 cultivators next to him were more frightening than tigers. No matter what, he couldn't calm his heart. At this time, footsteps were heard again. The city guard led another late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator in. "Senior, please sit. We can teleport in a moment." That city guard saluted and left. Different from how they treated Xiaohua, the 3 late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators opened their eyes. When they saw a cultivator of the same cultivation level, they didn't release their divine senses. 2 cultivators still had their eyes closed, while the other smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Gon, how come you're also here?" The cultivator called Fellow Taoist Gon also looked around for a moment before releasing his divine sense to scan Xiaohua's left and right. He stepped forward and cupped his hands. "If Fellow Taoist Shui can go, why can't this poor Taoist go?" Then, he glanced at Xiaohua, walked to the jade stool next to Shui Daoyu, and sat down. He said, "Shihuang Town is so lively, I naturally want to take a look. Fellow Gon, I'm afraid it's not that simple." Shui Daoyu said with a faint smile, then glanced at Xiaohua. Xiaohua really couldn't take it anymore. He got up from the stool, took down the bewildering Huan, and walked in front of the 4 late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators. He bowed and saluted, saying, Seniors, this junior greets you. Because I have some unspeakable troubles, I have to leave. If I have offended you in any way, I hope you can forgive me. When Xiaohua took down the bewildering Huan, the 4 cultivators had already seen Xiaohua's cultivation level. They were already disdainful of him. When they heard Xiaohua's words, none of them paid attention to him. That fellow Taoist Gan also withdrew his divine sense and whispered something to Xue Daoyu. However, he had already used a sound transmission technique, so others couldn't hear him. After Xiaohua finished speaking, the stone in his heart was finally put down. He put on the bewildering Huan again and silently sat to the side. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the city guard came in and said the transportation formation was ready. He asked everyone to get up. Xiaohua didn't dare to leave first. He waited until the 4 foundation establishment cultivators left before he walked in last. Following a passage with restrictions, they walked underground for a while. A transportation formation appeared in front of Xiaohua's eyes. It was the same formation that Xiaohua used to come to Shallow Language City yesterday. The transportation was very smooth. When Xiaohua carefully pretended to be dizzy and sat in the transportation formation, he had already arrived at Yenyuan City. The 4 late-stage foundation establishment cultivators didn't even look at Xiaohua. They rushed out of the transportation formation and went straight to find the city guard. As for how they were going to be transported to Shihuang town, Xiaohua didn't want to know. He only estimated that it was about time for him to pretend to be dizzy and walked out of the transportation formation. Just like before, when Xiaohua just came out, several divine senses locked onto him. However, when Xiaohua left Yenyuan City as if nothing had happened and directly flew in the direction of Xiunyan cult, those divine senses gradually disappeared. Damn it, why did I come out like a thief? This feeling is really unbearable. Xiaohua was extremely depressed by the inexplicable divine senses. He didn't know that the pearl in his space had caused such a huge disturbance in the cultivation world of the country of Xi. From Yenyuan City to Xiunyan cult, Xiaohua traveled together with Kai Zhuixia. It took quite a long time. This time, Xiaohua didn't dare to delay. His left and right body were confused. No one knew what cultivation level he was at. Urging all the transcendence energy in his body, he rushed towards Xiunyan cult with a speed comparable to foundation establishment. Alas, things remain the same but people have changed. It's just like this. Xiaohua saw Xiunyan cult's unusually grand guest pavilion and thought of Kai Zhuixia in his heart. If fellow Taoist Kai is here, she must be overjoyed. That embryonic breathing pill can help her break through the barrier of the 5th level of qi refining. When Xiaohua landed on the ground, the ones who came out of the guest pavilion were still Ming Feng and Ming Qing. When Ming Feng saw Xiaohua, he was slightly stunned. He turned to look at Ming Qing and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist, have you been to my Xiunyan cult before? Ming Qing was also a bit confused. He smiled apologetically. Fellow Taoist, are you that loose cultivator? Xiaohua had already removed the confusion, so it was naturally his true appearance. He smiled and said, I am indeed Xiaohua. It's fortunate that you 2 fellow Taoists still remember you're really that loose cultivator? Ming Qing's face showed even more astonishment. I remember that half a year ago. Fellow Taoist's cultivation was only at the early 4th level of qi refining. In just half a year's time. Ming Feng blinked his eyes and said somewhat strangely. I only had some other opportunities. It's nothing. Compared to the disciples of 2 famous sects, the difference is too great. Xiaohua didn't say much. He directly took out Shui Qingyuan's keepsake and said, I still came to visit fellow Taoists this time. I wonder if it's convenient for you to notify me? This? Ming Qing was a bit hesitant. Seeing this, how could Xiaohua not know the reason? He hurriedly took out several medium-grade spirit stones from his storage pouch and handed them over, saying with a smile, Fellow Taoists, you've worked hard. This is a small token of appreciation from I. Please accept it. Ming Feng waved his hand and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Xiao, there's no need to be polite. It's not that I don't want to notify you, but Senior Marshal Brother Zhua seemed to be in closed-door cultivation 2 months ago. He seemed to want to attack the 12th level of Qi refining. I don't know if Senior Marshal Brother Zhua has come out of closed-door cultivation. Ha! Hearing this, Xiao Hua was overjoyed in his heart. Zhui Qingyuan is in closed-door cultivation. Is there even a need to say it? It's definitely because the embryonic breathing pill was successfully refined. Immediately, Xiao Hua stuffed the spirit stones into Ming Cheng's hand and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, feel free to try. If you haven't come out of closed-door cultivation, I will leave right away and come back after a period of time." Hee, fellow Taoist Xiao is too courteous. Please. Ming Cheng received the spirit stones and raised his hand. Please wait inside for a moment, fellow Taoist Xiao. Good, it really makes a difference whether or not I have spirit stones to open the way. Xiao Hua inwardly sighed with emotion. The last time he came, these two boys simply didn't notify him and left Xiao Hua and Kai Shuixia hanging in front of them for several days. This time, they actually directly invited Xiao Hua to wait inside the guest pavilion. In fact, Xiao Hua actually still had some misunderstandings. His visit this time was different from last time. First, in half a year's time, he went from the early 4th level of Qi refining to the middle 4th level of Qi refining. This kind of progress in cultivation, even in Xuyuan cult, was considerable. Second, the Zhui Qingyuan he wanted to visit was also different from half a year ago. He was at the 12th level of Qi refining. Very soon, he would become a foundation-building senior. How could these two boys dare to slight him? Especially when they knew that Xiao Hua and Zhui Qingyuan were acquainted. This was a very exquisite small room. Inside, there was a jade table and a jade stool. On the table, there were fresh spirit fruits. Ming Qing and Ming Feng invited Xiao Hua into the small room. Only after someone brought in some spirit tea did they withdraw. Xiao Hua looked around and saw that the walls were faintly shining. He knew that there was a restriction in this small house. He sat on a jade stool and picked up a spirit fruit to taste. He had been hurrying on the road for more than 10 days and was also a little worried. It really made Xiao Hua feel a little tired. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Xiao Hua had just finished drinking the spirit tea when Ming Feng came in with a smile on his face. Fellow Taoist Xiao, Senior Marshal Brother Zhua already came out of seclusion several days ago. Right now, he's at the master's place. Please wait for a moment, Senior Marshal Brother Zhua will come right away. Huh? Xiao Hua stood up and asked. Then fellow Taoist Zhua, haha, Senior Marshal Brother Zhua has indeed entered the peak of Qi refining. If nothing unexpected happens, in a few years, I will have to call him Marshal Uncle Zhua. Ha ha, that's great. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, Then congratulations to Xuyuan School. Hearing Xiao Hua mention Xuyuan School, Ming Feng's expression also became serious. He cupped his hands and said, Many thanks, fellow Taoist Xiao. This is all due to Senior Marshal Brother Zhua's diligence, all due to the hard work of my master. Ming Feng poured some more spirit tea for Xiao Hua then withdrew. After waiting for a while, Xiao Hua's excitement slowly calmed down. Since the embryonic breathing pill was useful to Zhui Qingyuan, it was also useful to him. However, since cultivating until now, Xiao Hua had never encountered a bottleneck. He himself didn't know when to use this embryonic breathing pill, so he could only treat it as a backup. Just as he was thinking, the room's door was pushed open. Xiao Hua stood up and said with a smile, Congratulations, fellow Taoist Zhua. However, when he saw the person who came in, he was stunned. The person in front of him wasn't Zhui Qingyuan, but Xiao Mao. That 4th layer Qi refining, somewhat arrogant, somewhat childish, and somewhat impulsive Xiao Mao. Big brother Xiao, it's little brother. When Xiao Mao saw Xiao Hua, he quickly took a few steps forward and bowed in greeting. Big brother Xiao? Xiao Hua scratched his head and hurriedly supported Xiao Mao, somewhat muttering in his heart. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Xiao Hua supported Xiao Mao and said with a smile, the 2 words big brother. I'm afraid it's not appropriate. Xiao Mao straightened up, his eyes looking very sincerely at Xiao Hua and said, Little brother didn't understand before and did things that didn't care about the consequences. If it wasn't for big brother Xiao stopping me in time, I'm afraid I would have brought a lot of trouble upon myself. Xiao Hua said with a smile. That was just a small effort. The key point is that fellow Taoist Xiao is a disciple of Xiyunyan school. I am just a loose cultivator, so I don't deserve this title. -5. Chapter 1481. Big brother Xiao is wrong, Xiao Mao said with a smile. My aptitude is considered inferior among all the martial brothers. I'm not much better than big brother Xiao. Ouch! Only now did Xiao Mao notice Xiao Hua's cultivation. His face was filled with shock as he said, Big brother Xiao, you are already at the middle of the 4th level of qi refining? It's only been 2 years and big brother Xiao actually jumped from the 2nd level of qi refining to the middle of the 4th level. This aptitude, even in Xiyunyan school, it's considered average. This is nothing, Xiao Hua said indifferently. It's just some luck. How can it compare to the elegance of your Xiyunyan school? If fellow Taoist Xiao breaks through the bottleneck one day, the peak of qi refining can also be expected. Sigh. Xiao Mao's face showed a trace of bitterness, but he immediately covered it up and forced a smile. I'll borrow big brother Zhao's auspicious words. I hope this time it will be effective. This time? Xiao Hua didn't understand, but seeing that Xiao Mao had no intention of explaining, he didn't pursue the matter. Actually, big brother Xiao, the reason why I call you big brother is because my family has fallen from grace since I was a child. My parents tried to protect my life, but they were killed by someone with a high cultivation. That person thought that I was young at that time and didn't know his true identity. Actually, I remember very clearly. If I had a high cultivation, I would definitely avenge my parents, Xiao Mao said, tears in his eyes. Xiao Hua watched from the side and didn't know how to comfort him. He could only say, Since fellow Taoist Xiao has a blood feud, you have to work hard and cultivate. You can't let your emotions affect your decisions. Cultivate? Xiao Mao said with a bitter smile. Big brother Xiao is a loose cultivator. You should know which is more important between cultivation and talent. Admittedly, I entered Xiyunyan school, but I'm afraid I've already reached the end of my cultivation. Sigh, let's not talk about it. Big brother Xiao, when big brother Xiao entrusted the jade pendant left behind by mother to senior martial brother Zhua, I've already treated big brother Xiao as my big brother. I don't know big brother Zhao's background, and I don't know if big brother Xiao is willing to be this big brother. However, I don't have any relatives. In this world there is no one like big brother Xiao. He didn't even know who this little brother was, yet he helped this little brother. Furthermore, this little brother had mocked him several times. It's true, brother Xiao. When I saw the familiar jade pendant that often appears in my dreams, I felt that I must be dreaming, Xiao Mao said somewhat emotionally. Xiao Mao, I really didn't think too much about it. This is just a small matter for Xiao Hua scratched his head. Giving favors to others without asking for anything in return. Big brother Xiao, only such a person can be my big brother, Xiao Mao said in high spirits. But Xiao Hua still somewhat declined. He had been used to being alone for the past 2 years. He had never thought that someone would call him big brother. Actually, big brother Xiao, please don't make things difficult for me. Xiao Mao seemed to have matured a lot in this half a year. He wasn't in a hurry and instead said, The reason why I want to call you big brother is because of big brother Zhao's kindness. But more importantly, I'm afraid I won't be able to see big brother Xiao again. What? Xiao Hua was stunned and asked anxiously. What's going on? Xiao Mao was somewhat hesitant. A trace of craftiness appeared on his somewhat childish face as he said with a smile, This is my Xiyunyan school's secret. If it's not my family, this little brother wouldn't dare to easily tell you. Pfft. Xiao Hua almost laughed out loud. Looking at the trace of anticipation in Xiao Mao's eyes, he reached out and patted Xiao Mao's head a few times, just like he did at Jinghua City's EG. He said, "Since you don't want to call me Big Brother, it's fine if you don't say it. Big Brother Xiao!" Xiao Mao almost jumped up and shouted, "I knew it! Big Brother Xiao will definitely be my big brother. After all, we're both surnamed Xiao. If you don't become my big brother, who will?" Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and said to himself, "I really don't know what my surname is." However, he still smiled and said, "Enough. This big brother of mine is just a loose cultivator with a shallow cultivation. You won't get any benefits from calling him that." Xiao Mao's eyes had some tears as he said, "Big Brother Xiao, you're wrong. If you agree, I'll have another family member in this world. This is better than giving me anything. And, Xiao Mao, sit down first. What's the matter? You're just 12 or 13 years old. Even if you can't cultivate, it's not to the point where you won't be able to see Big Brother in the future," Xiao Hua said with a wave of his hand. "I'll let Big Brother know." Xiao Mao waited for Xiao Hua to sit down before he sat to the side and explained the matter. The reason for the matter was also very simple. Xiuyan's school obtained a cultivation method's cultivation chant from who knows where. However, this cultivation method was left behind from ancient times. It had already been who knows how many years since anyone cultivated it. However, this cultivation method could rapidly increase a cultivator's cultivation. It was something that all the cultivation methods in the present day could not hope to achieve. Thus, Xiuyan's school selected 99 disciples from some disciples whose cultivation was not up to par and let them try this cultivation method. Of course, Xiuyan's school also clearly explained the consequences of the cultivation method's success and failure, allowing these disciples to choose for themselves. Needless to say, even if it was Xiao Hua, if he encountered this kind of opportunity several years ago, he would also choose to try it without hesitation. After all, this was a kind of opportunity. Although the chances of failure were very high, but it was still better than not making any progress in cultivation. Strange, there's actually this kind of cultivation method? Xiao Hua was very puzzled. In his mind, he suddenly thought of the blood shadow technique. That kind of demonic technique that swallowed a cultivator's essence was the most direct and fastest way to increase cultivation. Xiao Mao, that cultivation method wouldn't be related to the demonic realm, right? Xiao Hua knew that he shouldn't ask, but he still couldn't help but ask. "Big Brother Xiao, what are you thinking?" Xiao Mao explained the matter, and the stone in his heart was also put down. Seeing Xiao Hua ask, he smiled and said, "My Xiuyan school is a large cultivation sect in the country of Xi. How could we use the demonic realm's techniques? Moreover, little brother has already agreed to participate in the trial. I've already obtained the cultivation method and such. In little brother's opinion, it has nothing to do with the demonic realm." "Oh, then that's good." Xiao Hua nodded and said, "Hee, Big Brother Xiao, you don't know. After little brother saw that cultivation method, only then did I know that in this world, there's actually such an unimaginable method that can actually merge magic treasures into the body at the Qi refinement stage." Xiao Mao seemed to be a little excited as he concealed it. "Sure," Xiao Hua hurriedly said. "This is the secret of your Xiuyan school. There's no need to tell Big Brother." Xiao Mao smiled and said, "That cultivation method is Xiuyan school's secret. When the teacher passed it on, little brother had already made a blood oath. But the method of merging magic treasures into the body didn't say that it can't be passed on. How about little brother tell Big Brother about it?" Xiao Hua's heart stirred, and he nodded and said, "If that's possible, Big Brother naturally wants to hear about it." When Xiao Mao told him about this method, Xiao Hua also slapped his head and said with a smile, "This method is indeed useful. But it seems the requirements for the body are a little high. I'm afraid that those body cultivators came up with it. Big Brother Xiao is indeed experienced and knowledgeable." Xiao Mao clapped and said, "I heard some senior brothers say that it's indeed so. It's precisely because the requirements are too high that it's very difficult for people to do it, so there's no need to be afraid of it being leaked." Soon after, his mood became downcast again. It's also because it's so difficult, and this method is only the simplest threshold for cultivation methods, so I'm afraid it'll be difficult for little brother to succeed. It's also because of this that senior Marshall brothers were received news that big brother Xiao was coming, so he sent a message to little brother, telling little brother to come see big brother Xiao one last time. Sigh. Xiao Hua sighed in his heart. Although Xiao Mao's cultivation was about the same as his, he was still a 12-year-old boy after all. His mood was unstable, and there wasn't any path ahead. It was no wonder that he was dejected. Xiao Mao, since you've chosen this path, then you must walk it with the idea of success. Otherwise, if you yourself don't believe that you'll succeed, will the heavens give you the chance to succeed? Xiao Hua didn't know what to say to persuade him, so he could only say it simply. And little brother knows. Xiao Mao raised his small face and said, Little brother just suddenly gained a relative like big brother Xiao, so it's somewhat hard for me to control myself. Just as they were talking, the door to the room was pushed open again, and Zhui Qingyuan walked in. Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao hurriedly stood up. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, Congratulations, senior martial brother Zhua. Now that you've reached the peak of the aura refining realm, you can expect to enter the foundation establishment realm. Zhui Qingyuan hurriedly returned the greeting and said with a smile, Isn't this all thanks to fellow Taoist Xiao? Then, he looked left and right and asked, Where's fellow Taoist Kai? Could it be that she's not in a hurry to get this embryonic breathing pill? Xiao Hua's expression was gloomy as he said, Fellow Taoist Kai has already died. She can't use this embryonic breathing pill anymore. Oh, what a pity! Zhui Qingyuan's face was also shocked as he said, Fellow Taoist Kai's character is upright, and she clearly distinguishes between gratitude and grudges. She's an extraordinary woman that's rarely seen. Why did she leave just like that? Sigh, this is fate. Xiao Hua briefly explained the matter. What a pity! Zhui Qingyuan also shook his head. If I hadn't told fellow Taoist Xiao about the fire essence flame crystal, I'm afraid this kind of thing wouldn't have happened. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please don't blame me. I clearly know that the fire essence flame crystal is an item that's practically extinct in the cultivation world, but I still felt lucky. After all, my Xuanyan sect put in a lot of effort for the fire essence flame crystal this time, and the reward is very generous. It's extremely beneficial to fellow Taoist Xiao or Lu Yang's Kai family, so... Zhui Qingyuan said very apologetically. I understand fellow Taoist Zhua's feelings, but I still thank fellow Taoist Zhua for his good intentions. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said. Then, his eyes turned and he asked, Could it be, this fire essence flame crystal is very hard to find? Haven't the other cultivation families found it? Maybe after a long time, but right now, there's no such thing, Zhui Qingyuan said absent-mindedly. Then, he patted his hand and took out a few jade bottles from his storage bag. He handed them over and said, These are 14 embryonic breathing pills. My sect's alchemist refined 24 of them and kept 8 for himself. I took 2 of them, so please accept them, fellow Taoist Xiao. 5. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.